Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the City Council meeting for Monday, June the 15th, 2020. Can we begin with a roll call, please?
Councillor Campbell.
Here.
Councillor Carlson.
Here.
Councillor Crowson.
Here.
Councillor Higgin.
Here.
Councillor Morrow. Councillor Miyashiro.
Here.
Acting Mayor Parker.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Present.
Mayor Spearman, sorry.
Here.
Thank you.
I'll now move on to the acknowledgement statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also the home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We'll now move on to bouquets. Councillor Miyashiro.
Yes, Mayor Spearman, thank you very much. I'd like to acknowledge that it's World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. In 2019-2020, the Lethbridge Elder Abuse Response Network case manager had 67 intakes, which resulted in 51 investigations and 30 open files. 107 people were referred out to other services. There are 25 different community organizations as part of the network. And something of note is that the City of Lethbridge Tax Assessment Department has recently partnered with LEARN to help identify possible cases of elder abuse where people over the age of 60 identified as being in arrears in their taxes are flagged as possible cases of elder abuse. The LEARN investigators brought in, and if it's indicated that it's not elder abuse, then it's passed along to the LSCO lead social worker. So the City of Lethbridge is a really important partner in helping us identify possible cases of elder abuse in the community.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to acknowledge the incredible career of Georgia Fuchs, who is a longtime educator with Lethbridge College, influenced hundreds, if not thousands, of students in journalism and radio art. She passed away earlier this week, and one of those students would have been the one and only Terry Vogt of CTV, who received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Radio Television Digital News Association just last week, I believe it was. Nearly 50 years of work, just unbelievable. He actually started with Marconi, I understand. So congratulations to Terry Vogt on that.
Very good. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. First and foremost, a bouquet. I'm watching the video, and I appreciate the fact that you are showing leadership in wearing a mask. We've got to normalize that to keep our cases down, so I appreciate that. I'd also like to send a bouquet out to the Lethbridge Group United Against Racial Discrimination. On Thursday, June 4th, they hold what is, in my memory at least, the largest rally protest event on City Hall property ever. It was a peaceful protest, well attended, and hopefully raising awareness of the issues that we still face in our community today. So thank you to the organizers for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kaufman. Okay. Councillor Morrow. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I just want to send out a bouquet to the volunteers and organizers of last Saturday's Target Hunger, who collected food from generous residents and donated it to our local food banks. So thank them for all their work, and hopefully they collected a lot of food.
Thank you. Councillor Higgin. Councillor Parker. Okay. I'd like to thank our Reconciliation Advisory Committee. Today we raised the flag, the Blackfoot flag, to begin Indigenous Peoples Week. And of course, a week from now, we'll be celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day. There are activities on the Reconciliation Advisory website that people can participate in. And I think it's important to highlight building positive relationships going forward based on mutual respect. Given the issues of racism that have been raised across the country and across the continent in the last week, important to focus on racism here at home in Lethbridge, and I thank the Reconciliation Advisory Committee for their good work. My second bouquet goes out to Nathan Sherwood. Nathan Sherwood is a young man in the city of Lethbridge who came forward to the Lethbridge Police Commission last year expressing concern about bike theft in the city of Lethbridge. Nathan had an idea, and kudos to Nathan and Lethbridge Police Services for following up on that idea about providing bicycle tags, stickers, to be placed on bicycles so that stolen bicycles can be more easily traced. So kudos for one of our youngest city residents for coming forward with an innovative idea to address a serious problem in the city of Lethbridge. Thank you. My bouquet out to Nathan Sherwood and Lethbridge Police Services for impacting that bicycle theft issue. And I'd encourage all bicycle owners in the city of Lethbridge to get a sticker if you have not already. Thank you. Well, with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I have a resolution from Deputy Mayor Kaufman. Be it resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council held Monday, June the 1st, 2020, be approved, and that the Mayor and the City Clerk be authorized to sign the same. And further be it resolved that City Council receive for information the City Council referral list with the following amendments. That City Council defer the date to return to Council from June the 15th to June the 29th, 2020 for the Financial Sustainability Strategy Resolution adopted May 25th, 2020. And that Council defer the date of return to Council from June the 29th, 2020 to no later than September the 14th, 2020 for the D34 Performing Arts Center Resolution adopted on February 24th, 2020. And further be it resolved that City Council give first reading to Bylaw 6300, Land Use Bylaw. Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Excuse me. Just a clarification on the second deferral. Excuse me, the second deferral statement. Date of return to council. That's actually a CIC. So are we coming back to Communities Issues Committee? Are we coming back to council? Or are we just accepting CIC as council? Which we are, but we're not.
I believe the date might be the following week, might be the 21st.
That be the 21st? Friendly amendment? Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I do have one question as well about land use bylaw, bylaw 6300. Do we have a date for second reading? And is there going to be a public hearing involved with this as well? The city manager designate?
Director of Infrastructure, if you could. There is a public hearing. There will be a public hearing.
Okay.
But I am not certain of the actual date, so we'll have to get back to council on the date. But this, like any other land use amendment, requires proper notice, and so there is a minimum amount of period, or a minimum period of time that we need to have that notice in place before we actually have the hearing. Madam Clerk, you're not aware of a specific date that's scheduled for the hearing at this point?
I am not aware, no.
We'll confirm that prior to and include it in the minutes of the meeting prior to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Thank you, Mr. Spearman. Unless there are any other questions, I'll call the question on the consent agenda.
Okay, question has been called. All in favor? Opposed? Online in favor? Thank you. Adoption of the agenda. I have a resolution from Acting Mayor Parker that the agenda of the regular City Council meeting of June the 15th be adopted, including all communications as submitted by the City Clerk. City Clerk, are there any amendments?
There is one addition to the agenda. It's a boards, committees, and commission matter. It's a verbal report. It'll be on the in-camera session, the in-camera portion as item 10.6. Thank you.
Okay, so we'd amend the resolution to say that the agenda of the regular City Council meeting of June the 15th, 2020, as amended, be adopted, including all communications as submitted by the City Clerk. Acting Mayor Parker.
Question, Mr. Mayor?
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to presentations. 4.1, Director of Emergency Management and our City Manager, COVID-19 update.
Good afternoon. As you're aware, Stage 2 of the provincial relaunch started last Friday, and as we briefed last Friday, we were in the process of working with the province to get guidelines that would govern how things like pools, arenas, et cetera, would reopen. And what I stated at that time was that we encourage the public to follow our social media means and also consult the city website for information as we work through these guidelines and take the steps that we need to take to open these facilities as soon as we can, but in a manner safe for the public and safe for staff. We have received the guidelines for pools and arenas now and are working through what it would take to reopen those. And we'll continue to push information out to the public as soon as we have it on those facilities. We're still waiting for the guidelines on transit, but we anticipate receiving those guidelines shortly. And I think that's it for now, Your Worship.
Are there any questions from council? I see none. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to submissions, 5.1. Okay, no, do we have to read the resolution? Resolution from Councillor Kaufman. Be it resolved that City Council receive this presentation as information, and further be it resolved that Mr. Dalton and Chief Rathwell be thanked for their presentation.
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. We now have a resolution from Councillor Crowson. Lethbridge Recovery Committee Terms of Reference. It's a submission. Be it resolved that the terms of reference for the Lethbridge Recovery Committee be amended to include a funding source and change the working group membership as in attachment 1. Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. This is essentially a housekeeping measure. We changed the terms of reference to reflect changes made in council appointments, with Councillor Campbell and Councillor Higgin changing task forces. We've also set aside a budget amount of $5,000 taken from our council travel and convention. I don't foresee any need for money at this time, but I will admit I'm not omniscient, so we have set aside a budget just in case something comes up. And so those are the two parts that we're changing the terms of reference if this resolution passes. And unless there's any questions, I will call the vote.
Are there any questions? I see none. Question's been called. All in favor? Opposed? There are none. Thank you. We'll move on to official business. I have a resolution from Councillor Higgin, rescindment of Pathway 24, 6 Mile Park, from Capital Improvement Program Project D11 Pathway System, Connections and Extensions. Whereas Capital Improvement Program Project D11 Pathway System and Connections and Extensions was approved by City Council on May the 23rd, 2017. And whereas on May the 25th, 2020, Community Issues Committee received a presentation with regards to Pathway 24, 6 Mile Park, as identified in Capital Improvement Program Project D11, Pathway System, Connections and Extensions. And whereas Council is responsible for the prioritization of projects that support the strategic priorities of our community, and whereas not proceeding with the construction of Pathway 24, 6 Mile Park as part of Project D11 will be a savings of $1,750,000 for the City of Lethbridge. Therefore, be it resolved that City Council rescind the approval of Pathway 24, 6 Mile Park within Project D11 in the 2018 to 2027 Capital Improvement Program budget as was approved in the May 23rd, 2017 meeting of Council. And further be it resolved that the construction of Pathway 24, 6 Mile Park be cancelled, and the 2018 to 2027 Capital Improvement Program budget be amended to reflect this cancellation. And further be it resolved that the City Manager engage and consult with local groups that utilize the coolies to discuss a strategy, framework, and partnership around which local organizations and the city can create a unique experience in our river valley. And further be it resolved that strategies include, but not be limited to, ways to identify, sign, map, and maintain natural trails while recognizing safety and preservation of our natural environment. And further be it resolved that City Council receive a joint presentation from community groups and the City Manager on the consultation outcomes and proposed strategies for natural use of our river valley no later than October the 31st, 2020. Councillor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. A couple weeks ago, this was brought forward for Council to look at this particular resolution, and there was a request to postpone this for 2 weeks to get the additional information that was required by some council members. It is my hope that we have received that information, those that were requiring additional information, and I think the debate that we had a couple weeks ago gave the reasoning for this particular resolution. So I'll open it up for questions.
Okay, there are some questions. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Councillor Higgin, for bringing this forward. I need some clarification. I'm not sure if it's from you or City Manager or City Treasurer, so I'll just ask it and whoever can answer. The second actionable clause, it talks about further be it resolved that the blah, blah, blah budget be amended to reflect this cancellation. I need clarity on what that means, because in my thinking, when Council approved D11, we approved, I believe, it was $500,000 a year for pathway connections, extensions, accessibility, etc. I'm sure that Pathway 24 isn't the only project that was contained in that, and so my fear is that we'd be removing that money from the budget, whereas it could actually be used to do other projects that are necessary and could be moved forward. So my clarity is, are we taking that money out of the budget, or are we just saying this project is canceled, but there are other worthwhile connections and pathways that need to be done, and so use those dollars to do those? That's my question.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Carlson. The savings, as stated in one of the whereas, that be a savings of $1.75 million for the City of Lethbridge would mean to remove that from that Project D11. Now, as far as it gets into the weeds, I may have to turn that over to the city financial guru, please. Thank you, Haley.
Mayor Spearman, through to Councillor Carlson. Based on how the resolution is, my interpretation of the resolution would be that the 1.75 million would be discontinued from this project. The total within that 4-year window is $2 million. So that difference has already been allocated to other projects or earmarked for other projects. So the funding sources for that 1.75 million would be pay-as-you-go and federal gas tax, and so those would be returned for future CIPs in terms of available funding should this resolution be approved.
Okay, thank you for that. Just further to that, so a follow-up question. Are there other projects that could benefit from that 1.75 million that could be moved forward? Or would it be okay to wait until the next CIP for any of those? I'm just thinking of the stimulus and getting people back employed. Are there other projects that are waiting in the wings, or is it all right to let this wait for a year or more before we move forward with other pathway connections?
Can I answer that? Or is that?
It sounds like an administrative question.
Okay, because I was just...
Like, when he asked, are there other projects waiting in the wings? I believe I would ask the city manager or designate to answer that question.
Yeah, Director of Infrastructure, please.
Yeah, we were all in with this project. There is nothing in the wings at this particular point. So if council is to approve the resolution, that money would return to be available for future consideration as part of the next CIP. In fact, I would suggest that, yeah, given where we're at with that overall program, albeit an annualized program, and that we were largely committed to this, and it was quite significant, that we would have to completely rethink the go-forward plan, and that might as well happen as part of some additional planning to bring forward for future deliberations. So, yeah, there's nothing in the wings, as in the words of Councillor Carlson, at this particular point.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And final question, if I may. None of the 1.75 has been expended on a design or anything. The full 1.75 can be returned?
The 1.75 is the construction estimate right now. It doesn't include money that's already been committed and spent on the actual detailed design. It is what is truly available for construction, so it would be available for future consideration. That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Croson.
Please don't kill me, but I'm going to suggest an amendment. It's a small one. Can we go to the second last operative clause? I know we have strategies include but not limited to, but I'd like to strengthen that last one, where it says preservation of our natural environment, as well as historical and archaeological resources, and with the involvement of HPAC. I would like to include after natural environment. I have it here written. Because natural resources are not the only thing we need to preserve in the river valley. If we don't preserve our historical and archaeological resources, we would be kicking ourselves in the future. And then in brackets, and with the involvement of HPAC. Why have an organization that is one of our committees?
Okay, so we will deal with that amendment. Can we move on with the questions, or do we need to? Could you introduce? I'll recognize you to introduce that amendment after we've dealt with the questions.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, and thanks for bringing forward the resolution. I just wanted to know, when you talk about involving local groups, how do you determine which ones are the local groups and making sure that they're all heard? How do you, what's the process to get all of those involved?
I think one of the clauses that were added in there that city manager would be in discussion, consultation, and bring back that information no later than October 31st. So throughout this process, I have met with various different organizations, and they've indicated wanting to join together for future causes, to be able to assist with those users, the stakeholders that are using the River Valley, to bring that information forward and have those discussions, hopefully with our city manager, and that from that point forward, we'll have an answer back on October 31st, how we could do that going forward.
And I would imagine overwhelming support to go along with this from the people you've talked to?
So far, 100%. The new addition here, I'm sure that shouldn't be an issue, and I got to find out here. So are we dealing with this, with the amended now? Not yet? Okay, it was up there. Okay, so yeah, so far, yes, 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Kaufman, sorry.
Just call me Jeff today, it's fine. Thank you, Mayor Spearman. A question to the city manager or designate. If the 1.75 is returned, in essence, to the capital program, council can reallocate that somewhere else. Is that not correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Recovery Lethbridge, we've had a couple of conversations, I know, as the body itself, as well as subcommittees, about trying to get projects going in our community to spur on the economy. This 1.75 could be reallocated to one of those such projects, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spearman.
Councillor Hagan, do you have a question for yourself?
I do. I just, for myself. I could probably answer it too, but I think I'm going to ask through a city manager designate, just to better understand what was mentioned with the cost to date. So we haven't spent anything to date. I was trying to figure out what from, I call him Deputy Mayor Carlson before, it's all around from Councillor Carlson. Has there not been any cost to date to prepare for this?
Yeah, there's been design costs. I believe $136,000 been spent on the actual detailed design in the tender documents.
136,000. That's all I need. Thank you.
Okay. Acting Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and my question through the city manager or his designate. So if this resolution is to pass and we go back to, for lack of a better term, the drawing board to address the concerns that we've heard through email, through phone, through social media, with obviously when they come back October 31st with a possible new project or a possible something, there's going to be a cost to that in regards to the new project. Could that $1.7 million that was now going to be put aside, could that money have been used for the new let's say Pathway 24 2.0? Could that money be used for that, or would we have to find a whole new funding source and a whole new resolution?
I defer to the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would be my advice that we not second guess or presuppose what a future planning exercise might come up with, and truly, if something comes of that discussion, that additional dialogue, that it inform a future ask and a new ask of City Council, and given how close we are to the actual next formal CIP process, that we wait and deliberate and have it evaluated in the context of the overall CIP.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Appreciate that.
Are there any further questions from council? I see none, so we'll deal with the resolution. If you could please read the resolution again, Councillor Crowson, the amendment.
I think it was captured. So it's right after natural resources, it would say, as well as historical and archaeological resources, and then kind of in brackets and with the involvement of HPAC, on which we have a committee to deal with archaeological and historical resources. And Ryan has written it out as Historic Places Advisory Committee. So I would suggest we put that in there. I know it does say not limited to, but I'd like that specified if my colleagues agree, because we have protection of those resources as well as part of our mandate.
Thank you. Is there any questions on the amendment? I see none. Debate?
It's good, let's do it.
Okay, let's see if everyone else shares your opinion. Okay, that sounds like you're calling the question.
Yes.
Okay. All in favor of the amendment? Online? Any opposed? Okay, that is unanimous. So the amendment is added to the resolution. Now we'll move to debate on the main resolution as amended. Councillor Higgin.
I'll hold till close.
Any further debate? Councillor Croson.
So I've been thinking a lot about this Pathway 24, and whatever, if we go ahead with it, it will be named Pathway 24. This project, though, is part of a much larger topic, and I think that's where some of the difficulties are coming from, because it's about the river valley. It's how to manage access, to protect our natural resources, our archaeological and historical resources. There are some incredibly important sites in the river valley and our nearby areas, and this whole project, and I can see why it's been taking so many years, it is about balancing all those needs. It's about ensuring that all the voices are heard and that the process reflects that. It's about looking at our own policies internally, reviewing them if needed, and seeing if they're still the best policies moving ahead, because of course our community has changed as much as the city has changed. We have the responsibility of stewardship of an amazing resource. Anyone who comes here from outside Lethbridge recognizes our river valley, our coulees, all the things that are in there are so valuable, and any decision we make will profoundly impact it for decades or centuries. We particularly have to be strong stewards and protectors, as I said, of those archaeological, historical, and natural resources. For that reason, I will vote with canceling this project, not necessarily because I don't think it's a good project, but I think we do have to go back for an even more robust discussion. Perhaps with the advisory committee, we can move forward on even other projects, ensure that whatever we do is right and fair, and not only be right and fair, to be seen right and fair. And I am supporting a larger discussion and will be voting for this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I too will support rescinding the Pathway project. I believe everything that Councillor Croson just said. I also believe a wise senior told me last week is determine what the most and best use of that area is and go with that. I think there's a real lesson to the community in this whole process as well, in that council has approved this project, 3 times? And it was only after the last time that there was some uproar. I don't think the whole community can blame city staff for anything when this has actually come on a public agenda at least 3 times since 2017, and so people need to pay attention. And so it takes a few minutes to look at the council agenda, to look at what's going on in the city, and then to make a decision for yourself whether something's being done or not. I think it's not that you're lucky, but I think it's a good thing that this council is willing to take a second and third look at things, whereas I think it was stated in another meeting that this really isn't the process that we've been used to and that we do regularly. So I will support this, and I will encourage our community to really pay attention to what we're doing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I will be supporting the resolution as well. I just as I mentioned, I believe in the last council meeting, the overwhelming support to rescind this, and what I appreciated was the very reflective and very thoughtful emails and phone calls that at least I received. That people were passionate, but they also had a lot of things to back up with why they're choosing to rescind this. So I appreciate that, and I think because I received no emails saying please go ahead with the project. So I have to listen to that, but I also really appreciate the collaborative effort that is being suggested in this resolution as well, to get all of the groups involved so that we can come to an agreement with all of the things that we need to come to agreement with. So I appreciate the resolution the way it is, and as I said, I'll support it.
Acting Mayor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I appreciate the comments. And I appreciate the comments of, in particular of Councillor Mayor Shiro, because I think our staff did do a really good job in getting to us to this point. But obviously, when we come to the point where we're about to pull the trigger on this, a lot of people go, whoa, I didn't realize that was going to occur, and maybe they missed being part of the presentation or part of the open houses and all that. So I put a lot of weight into what our staff has done. They've done a really good job, but also we've had numerous emails. I think since this term has started, this has probably been the most talked about on social media, by the emails we get, the phone calls we get, and it comes from a lot of people, not only the bike users, but also the people that just use that area in general, like hikers, trail runners, naturalists. So I'm trying to find a compromise here, but this is not the fault of our administration, our staff. They had best intentions and all that. It's just now when it comes to the point where we're about to spend these funds, it's not a matter of me wanting to save $1.7 million. I just want to make sure if we're going to do this, let's do it right. And let's hopefully we can get a consensus, a majority of the community. I know come October 31st, we're probably not going to have everyone on the same page, but if we can get a little closer and finding some kind of solution, I'm encouraged by that. So I will be supporting this.
Any other members of council wish to speak? I too will support the resolution. I think it's important that we pause at this point. I think the acknowledgement that there are safety issues to be addressed is also important. I hope that there will be a balanced consultation, that we will recognize specific issues. I think it's also important to look at areas we should be thinking of beyond the activity as well. So what is the impact, the preservation of our natural environment, the impact on our historical artifacts that may be in the area, things. So let's have a balanced discussion. I hope that 4 months is long enough to have that balanced consultation, recognition of the issues, and a subsequent report back to council. So I will support the resolution because I think it's time to have a deliberate review of this particular project to make sure that we have it right. If there's no other councillors wishing to speak, I will ask Councillor Higgin to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you to my colleagues for those comments. Going back, I think for when it came to the engagement sessions, I think one of the confusing parts from what I've heard is that when it was first presented in 2017 and some of the discussions after, this dealt with not only Pathway 24, and I'm sorry to use Pathway 24, I'm sure Mr. Hawkins is going, it's not Pathway 24, but this was part of many, as Councillor Carlson had mentioned in the funding source of it. This is for our pathways throughout the community. And so, of course, it was not just for Pathway 24. So the understanding that I'd received over the past while is that was that communication part there. But I think through this whole process and looking at some of the additional changes that have come to the resolution, the amendments, that will capture that. I do also want to take an opportunity to thank the citizens throughout Lethbridge for being so engaged. As Councillor Parker had mentioned, I was shocked, I guess, on how many comments and concerns and questions that came through email, phone calls, Zoom meetings, etc. And so I think it's important that as council we listen to that and of course work with these citizens, and I'm looking forward to having city manager sit down with these different groups or whatever that process may be to try to get them to come together and get the consultation from the organizations that use these pathways. And I do thank administration for bringing this forward and bring it to where we are today. And so with that, I would ask for council support.
Okay, question has been called. All in favor? And online?
In favor.
In favor.
Okay. That motion is unanimous. It required 2/3 approval. That motion has passed. Thank you. The next item I'm sponsoring, I wonder if I can have our Deputy Mayor read the resolution.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I have a motion from Mayor Spearman, opioid crisis class action lawsuit support. Whereas municipalities across Canada are contending with the social consequences of the opioid crisis, and whereas the pharmaceutical companies that manufacture these substances should be held responsible for the increased costs associated with community and social programs relating to the opioid crisis, and whereas the impact and the cost to the city of Lethbridge with the opioid addiction has been significant, and whereas, on behalf of all Canadian municipalities that have been affected by the opioid crisis, the City of Grand Prairie has filed a class action lawsuit against pharmaceutical companies manufacturing opioids to recover costs associated to the opioid crisis. And whereas the City of Lethbridge is fully committed to continuing to combat the effects of the opioid crisis, including the class action lawsuit filed by the City of Grand Prairie, therefore, be it resolved that City Council confirm their support for the action taken by the City of Grand Prairie. Mayor Spearman.
Thank you. I'm going to add a couple of amendments. The first one is to protect the City of Lethbridge from any additional financial costs. That amendment would read, "and join the class action lawsuit and participate on a contingency fee basis." That's what I had circulated to council members on the weekend. That protects us. Basically, any cost would be would be paid out of the final settlement, and any remaining funds would be dispersed to the participants, including the City of Grand Prairie and the City of Lethbridge and others across the province.
Thank you. We'll just give Ryan a moment here to catch up, so members of council can read the amendment.
And join the class action lawsuit and participate on a contingency fee basis. So basically, that is a fee limitation clause.
Okay. Thank you. Can we take questions on them in order? So we'll deal with this one first, if that's all right.
I have one more amendment after that, but yes,
okay,
sure.
We'll deal with one amendment at a time. Are there any questions, Madam Clerk, on the First Amendment?
Councillor Croson.
Okay. Do you have any questions on the First Amendment? Okay, seeing none, hearing none. Let's actually vote on this First Amendment, and that way we don't have two on the floor at the same time for debate. So, Mayor Spearman, you've opened. Do you wish to continue?
Nope, simply a fee limitation clause protects the City of Lethbridge from additional fees.
Okay, thank you. Is there any debate on this amendment? Seeing none, hearing none, Mayor Spearman, do you wish to close debate on this amendment?
Just ask for council's support.
Okay, question has been called. All those in favor? Opposed? Hearing none, that's carried. The second amendment you have?
Yes, recommended by our city solicitor that we say also as another amendment, and explore the possibility of becoming a representative plaintiff in the litigation.
Okay, we'll just wait a moment for...
And explore the possibility of becoming a representative plaintiff in the litigation.
Thank you. I might ask the city solicitor if he could put that into plain English.
The reason I use the phrase representative plaintiff is because it has a particular meaning within the kind of lawsuit this is, as a class action lawsuit. As it's currently laid out, we're already a member of the class, and realistically that becoming a representative or a co-representative plaintiff with the City of Grand Prairie, as far as I can ascertain at this time, is the only way that we could become more involved than we already are.
Thank you. So when you state already a participant, just for clarity, if this motion were defeated, we're still a participant in the class action lawsuit in the province of Alberta?
Yeah, the City of Lethbridge is a member of the class proposed in the current statement of claim. That process would have to go to a point where a court approves or certifies that class. And if the city was directed by council not to be a part of that class, we would need to opt out of that class, as that's the default situation in Alberta is that we're in if proposed, unless we take active steps to opt out.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Spearman, do you wish to open then on your amendment? Oh, do we have another question? Councillor Morrow?
Questions, right? Sure, about the amendment.
Yeah, questions on the amendment, please.
Can you just repeat what you just said? Because we are already, you said, part of this class action lawsuit? So maybe explain the difference. If we already are, what's this amendment doing?
So the way class action lawsuits work is generally a law firm will represent what's called a representative plaintiff. So just to use a totally different example, let's say there was a class act, and this will show my age, but for everybody who was overcharged late fees by Blockbuster Video. That's quite a big possible class, and it would be economically impossible to get the $20 maybe from every person. So class action lawsuits pick one plaintiff who then represents the class of plaintiffs. The firm describes that class, and in this case, it's all Canadian municipalities. And then ultimately, to ensure that that class is not too broad or too narrow, a court will hear arguments from different sides. In this case, the manufacturers would say probably it's too broad, and Grand Prairie will say no, it's the right size. Any member of the class can make representations there, and then a court will certify the class. And then once that class is certified, then the real litigation sort of begins, and all members of that class benefit, but the facts that are litigated are based on what's called the representative plaintiff. So you don't have to litigate each and every claim. You do it once, and then everybody benefits from it. So we are part of the proposed class. It would be premature to say we're a part of it until technically a court certifies that class as being accurate, because the court could certify a class that wouldn't include us in theory. But until that process goes further, I can't say more.
Okay, can I make it just a little more simpler? So I'm reading becoming a representative plaintiff. What does that do to what you just described? If we're already in, what does this do?
If council wanted to become a representative plaintiff and the existing City of Grand Prairie was amenable to that and amended the pleadings that way, it would be the circumstances and facts of the City of Lethbridge coupled with that of Grand Prairie that would be used to make the representative case that the manufacturers of these pharmaceuticals were liable, and might use facts from this community to demonstrate damages if the litigation got that far.
Councillor Higgin?
Not eat anymore, but just a question. If we did nothing, as Councillor Morrow's question was to you, we would still be involved in this class action suit? Because it's every community in Canada. Did I understand that correctly?
Statement of claim as filed, and there's been no statement of defense yet. So this is very early in the whole process.
Right.
The class as proposed by the plaintiffs, and they generally will want to define it quite broadly, today includes us.
Includes us already?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So the benefit of this amendment, which is harmless, which is to explore the possibility of becoming a representative plaintiff as indicated by the city solicitor, so we can state the facts and the impact on the City of Lethbridge specifically. So that's the purpose, and all we're doing is exploring the possibility. So the city solicitor would come back and tell us the pros and cons of doing it after exploring it further. But the main point of this is the City of Lethbridge has been one of the cities that has been most severely impacted by the opioid crisis in Alberta. And having our facts and our circumstances as part of the case would only strengthen the case. But the amendment says we're not making that final decision, we're just exploring the possibility. And coming back, the city solicitor would come back to council with a recommendation, at a subsequent date whether we should actually become a representative plaintiff.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Did you have a follow-up question to that, Councillor Higgin?
I did to that. Is that okay?
To that,
okay?
yeah.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, then Mayor Spearman, we're going to explore this, but we still can opt out at that time if we decide that, you know what, we're okay with the original, you know, we're going to be on this class action, but we don't have to be the representative plaintiff in the litigation if we get advice accordingly, right?
Right. It's basically looking into the possibility of seeing whether it would strengthen the case if the City of Lethbridge was a representative plaintiff, and whether there's any risk to the City of Lethbridge of doing that.
There'll be a further resolution coming in the future once, okay.
After we get a report from the solicitor.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. City Solicitor, I did some research on pros and cons of class actions, and two of the cons are lack of control, and you don't have any control of the effectiveness of the plaintiff's attorney. That's out of your control. Would becoming a representative plaintiff give us more control in those two areas?
Ultimately, that would depend upon the contractual arrangement that would be struck, but it's likely, yeah. The representative plaintiff has more interactions with the firm and everything else, but that firm has already been chosen, and so that process is already underway.
It might. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Moore, you had a question earlier, out of line. Okay, thank you. Any other members have questions? Councillor Campbell?
Is this on overall or this amendment?
This is on the second amendment.
Okay. I'll wait.
Okay, thank you. Just a clarification then of the wording on this second amendment. If something is coming back, and since we are exploring the possibility, do we need a date? It's always best to have dates as to when things will come back.
City solicitor suggests 2 weeks.
Solicitor suggesting 2 weeks. If it's okay to the mover of the amendment to put that in, I'd appreciate having a timeline on there so we all know.
Okay, so that would be June the 29th. Yeah.
Councillor Higgin?
So if this is coming back in 2 weeks, is it important we have this done today, or if we wait for the information to come back, we could
pass
it then?
the amendment and possibly consider the whole resolution in 2 weeks, possible, yeah, if you wish to. Yeah.
I just thought it would be a lot longer, so I thought the 2 weeks would, okay.
The true answer to the question about exploring that possibility is likely more complex than a yes or no answer. Certainly 2 weeks, I'd have a preliminary answer back what those discussions with the law firm involve. But if I created the impression that you'd have a complete and clear understanding of what that would look like in 2 weeks, I misspoke, but I could have some preliminary information at that time. Yeah, a lot of this is going to depend on the responsiveness of the law firm,
So,
the representatives of the class.
Mayor Spearman?
so June the 29th might be premature. What if we said when appropriate, right? Or if you're going to explore, then you'd get back to us at some point in the future. Do we have to have a defined date?
I don't need a defined date. I understood that might be important to council and can work towards that. You could say as soon as possible or before the end of summer. I'm happy to come back intermittently and provide progress as well. But I suspect some of that conversation might happen in camera as it deals with particular legal advice before coming to another open meeting for a resolution of direction, further direction.
I would end the motion at the end of city council with a period. And with a report back to city council. And give you the flexibility of, yeah.
So then members of council understand that if this amendment passes on the entire body, what we're saying is that we would join the class action lawsuit, but there would be further exploration on the becoming a representative plaintiff. Okay, thank you. Any other questions on the amendment? Councillor Hagan?
So just to confirm, we've removed the date then, obviously.
We have removed the date.
But there will be a report back to City Council.
Prior to going forward with the next, with the okay, or if that's, okay.
Any further questions on the amendment? Okay, any debate on the amendment? Madam Clerk, nobody in the queue? Okay, hearing none, Mayor Spearman to close.
Just call the question on the amendment.
Question's been called. All those in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed, so I'd like to ask for a roll call.
Councillor Miyashiro.
In favor?
Councillor Morrow. Councillor Hagan. Councillor Croson.
In favor.
Councillor Carlson.
In favor.
Councillor Campbell.
Favor?
Acting Mayor Parker.
Favor?
Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Favor.
Mayor Spearman.
In favor?
Carried 8-1.
Thank you. That amendment carries. So now to the resolution, or sorry, to the motion as it's presented with the two amendments included in it. Mayor Spearman is opened. Prefer to move
Councillor
into...
Croson is in the queue.
Prefer to move to debate, but question on the motion?
Yes, thank you. I have questions through the city manager to the city solicitor. I mean, joining a class action lawsuit or affirming it is a big decision. Last October, if I understand, the province of Alberta joined with BC for a class action lawsuit. Ontario, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Saskatchewan also joined. Is there any effect, risk, et cetera, on the province's class action lawsuit by this class action lawsuit?
The two classes and damages are distinct. I'd be happy to bring a PowerPoint explaining some of those differences to council in the future to explore some of that. But the law firm that is acting in this lawsuit has made it clear that in their view, municipalities would not form part of the class that the province of BC and Alberta have. So they really are two separate proceedings at this point that I can't pretend to predict the future about what could happen in terms of cross impacts, but they don't look like they're connected at this point other than the subject matter.
And continuing on from that, so if we're not going to affect theirs, that's great. What are the risks and benefit of joining? I know, like some of it, like I said, lack of control. We should not expect a lot of money, you know, even if you do win something in it. If we fail, can we ever do another lawsuit against the defendants, or is it one shot, you're done?
General principles would say that, you know, if you've taken your swing at a particular claim, you get one shot in court.
But the benefit is stronger together if the cities all join in.
Yeah, these are policy discussions around class action lawsuits in general, which is on one hand, you could say it might bring access to justice to classes of people that might not take on those cases on their own because of the hurdles and the expense in that litigation. And on the other side, the entities that are often named are corporate entities, and it takes a lot of energy for them to defend against these. So it increased the amount of claims against these companies on one hand. So depending on how you feel about that, the court's process does try to balance those two different policy outcomes, and that's the main purpose of making sure when the court certifies the class that it's the right class that's been certified and not overly broad, forcing or perhaps burdening commercial enterprises with undue hardship.
And one final question. What's the risk, if any, to the city if we go ahead?
Difficult to assess at this early stage, but one might wonder if there was a spectacular failure of this lawsuit and we were a part of it, we might endure some reputational damage. That being said, as we're not driving it, I would anticipate that being minimal. I can't think of any other downsides to that at this point. Certainly if some emerge, I would advise council immediately.
Thank you.
Councillor Campbell, questions?
Yes, thank you. Just wondered, is this lawsuit, is this specifically to Canada, municipalities in Canada? And what about the manufacturers? Are there, I mean, because I know that there was a big lawsuit in the States, same guy that went after the cigarette companies. Are we tailing onto his information or that information, or is this, we're strictly going Canadian? Because, and where are the manufacturers as far as opioids go?
So the law firm acting in this class action does have a relationship with parallel litigation in the United States. But this is a statement of claim in this country and subject to this laws. The manufacturers, wherever the factory might be, have corporate entities in Canada. And so they would be, those are the people who are being named and being sued, which, while they are probably arms of the manufacturer, might probably just be sales and marketing divisions in this country to some extent. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Morrow.
City Solicitor, what's this going to cost us?
Not expecting that at this point we pay anything. Generally speaking, members of the class are just participants and along for the ride. Often it is the representative plaintiff that will pay, and I'm speculating this is the way it often happens because I'm not privy to the particular details of any contractual relationship between the city of Grand Prairie and the law firm. But generally speaking, the representative plaintiff would pay disbursements so that the law...
That would be Grand Prairie.
Yeah, and then
Of which we now are representative plaintiffs ourselves.
No, we're not. If this passes, we will explore that possibility and would not become such without a further motion of council. But if we were, and it's those questions that I think we need more concrete answers on than I would be able to provide today, which is why I suggested language like explore the possibility rather than leaping to doing that. I think we need to understand we need to have a deeper understanding of what being a representative plaintiff might have as a practical outcome to our corporation versus just being a member of the class.
So in your best guess, how long would this process take? This
Years.
class action lawsuit?
Years.
Years. Okay, and have you seen, and I don't know what you call it, but whatever Grand Prairie, whatever makes this class action lawsuit, I imagine there's documents that they've prepared. They've handed them to who? Who would they hand them to? Or who would they file this class action lawsuit?
The Court of Queen's Bench in Alberta.
So have you seen those documents?
I've seen the statement of claim and I'm happy, they're public documents, I'm happy to provide them to council.
Hand them, will we?
Well, they're fun to read.
Okay, so passing this resolution means we're just basically sending you out to explore and come back. If we vote no to this resolution, we're still part of the class action lawsuit.
If you voted no to this resolution, my interpretation of that would be that this council may or may not want to remain a member of the class going forward. I'm just sort of putting on the hat of
But
maybe...
we are. You said we are.
We are, but this is a generic expression of support and interest in perhaps becoming more involved. And if council signaled that they didn't want to support it, that might raise the question in the minds of Grand Prairie and the firm carrying the action as to whether Lethbridge was potentially considering opting out of the class. I don't want to presume which way council might decide, but I interpret that as worded currently. We support this. The city of Lethbridge agrees that this is a suit that needs to continue on, and we're interested in learning more about if we could participate more fully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. Just for clarification, and for all of us, the operative clause has two action pieces to it. The first being that we participate on a contingency fee basis. So basically, what that's saying is that Grand Prairie is driving the bus and all the municipalities are passengers in the bus. The second one is to explore the possibility of becoming a representative plaintiff. That's saying we want to move from passenger to navigating or sharing the driving responsibilities. In the absence of this motion, however, we're on the bus as a joyful participant, whether or not we know it or want to. Excellent, thank you. Yes. Any further questions from members of council? Okay, seeing none, move to debate. Mayor Spearman, you have opened, or are you?
I can do. This, no doubt about it, it's an affirmation motion. What it also does is recognizes that if you read the background on what City of Grand Prairie has done, participating on a contingency fee basis means that all costs are paid out of any possible subsequent award. So that limits the cost, and exploring the possibility of becoming a representative plaintiff in the same way as Grand Prairie. The benefit of that is to share our experience as the City of Lethbridge. So the opioid crisis evolved from initially overprescription of drugs, and then those drugs were duplicated by illicit people. Basically, counterfeit drugs, copycat drugs, were developed because there was a market for it when people no longer could get subscriptions for the legal drugs that they were now dependent on. So that has a huge impact, and that has driven, acknowledged to be the root cause of the opioid crisis across North America. In countries where there wasn't widespread distribution and prescription of opioids, like Australia, they haven't encountered the same issues that we've encountered in North America. So what this lawsuit is intended to do is go back to the organizations, to the companies that precipitated the crisis, and get them to pay the costs. And we, in some part, would recover some of the costs that have been borne by the City of Lethbridge. So that's the general purpose. So to affirm that we would be part of it, to be participating on a basis where we don't have to pay fees, it's only paid out of a subsequent award, and to look at the possibility of contributing our experience to the possible success of the ultimate suit. So that's the opening.
Thank you. Debate? Nobody in the queue according to the clerk. Councillor Hagan.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation, Mayor Spearman. I will support this, as I see and have been explained that there's no cost at this point, and that our city solicitor will be coming back with, different options, or will explain what our option is at that time. I was somewhat concerned is that we start to get and drive the buses, as Deputy Mayor Kaufman, that one over there, had mentioned that there may be a cost at that point, but that's something we bring back before we are to make a decision on that. So currently, with no cost and exploring it, I will support this.
Thank you. Any other debate? Councillor Morrow.
Well, I was a little bit hesitant to support this because after I'm hearing that we're already part of this, and then thanks to you, Deputy Mayor, when you said we're on the bus, and if we pass this resolution, we're now going to be, my understanding, help steering the bus. At this moment in time, I think being on the bus is probably the best way to be right now, so I won't support it.
Councillor Morrow, can I just interject? You may have misinterpreted. The first part of the operative clause states that we are just going to be a passenger on the bus, but we're consciously stating we want to be a passenger. The second part, the part that's currently highlighted in yellow, is when the city solicitor will come back with information about, do we want to drive the bus as well? So as the motion currently stands, we're just a passenger on the bus. We're a conscious passenger on the bus, but we're not driving.
Thanks for that. I understand that, but we are on the bus with or without this resolution.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I apologize for the bus metaphor. Any other debate for members of council? Madam Clerk, no one in the queue. Mayor Spearman to close.
Just call the question.
Question has been called. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion carries. The process has been, and that was my mistake last time, the process has been if there's no objection online, we assume that it's affirmed. It's an affirmed vote. If we hear objection online, that's when we go to roll call. So my apologies to Councillor Morrow on the amendments.
Okay, thank you. With council's permission, it's 2:42. Do we continue with the rest of the official business resolutions at this point? Or do we take a break? You'd like a bio break? Okay, we'll take a break and return in 10 minutes at 10 minutes to 3. 2:50. Thank you. Okay, we'll resume the city council meeting. We're at 6.3, official business. I have a resolution from Deputy Mayor Jeffrey Kaufman, 2020 Alberta Urban Municipalities Association Resolution, Provincial Sales Tax for Municipal Capital Project Support. Whereas it is difficult for Alberta municipalities to build capital project based on funds generated by property taxes alone, and whereas Alberta municipalities depend upon provincial grants to support capital projects in our communities, and whereas Alberta municipalities understand the Government of Alberta's desire to reduce provincial spending, and whereas Alberta municipalities understand that of this reduced spending includes a reduction in funds available for municipal capital projects, and whereas in the absence of provincial grants, Alberta municipalities lack the appropriate tools to generate additional revenues for capital projects, and whereas the Government of Alberta wants to work collaboratively with municipalities in continuing to offer and develop tools and programs to support well-managed, accountable, and sustainable municipalities, and whereas the Government of Alberta desires to help municipalities meet their strategic long-term infrastructure needs, and whereas the Government of Alberta could support municipalities by implementing a provincial sales tax of 1%, and whereas this sales tax would be dedicated solely to generate revenues for municipal capital projects only, and whereas this sales tax could generate approximately $8 billion annually for municipal capital projects, therefore be it resolved that the AUMA requests that the Government of Alberta implement a provincial sales tax of 1%, with the revenues generated from that tax being completely dedicated to Alberta municipalities solely for the purpose of provincial financial support of capital projects in our communities. And further be it resolved that the resolution be forwarded to the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, AUMA, for consideration at their annual general meeting in September 23rd, 20 to 25th in Calgary. Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you to members of council for entertaining this conversation. The motion is actually laid out in hopefully a very easy to understand format. We know that we are challenged with building within our community, building the infrastructure that's important and essential to our community. We know that we have traditionally, as municipalities across Alberta, municipalities across Canada have depended upon provincial grants to support capital projects. We know that we've got a current provincial government that is looking to reduce its cost of operating as well, and part of that impact we're seeing in terms of reductions of grants, elimination of grants to municipalities, the ending of the Municipality Sustainability Initiative. Excuse me. So we are entering into a period where funding support for capital projects in our community is going to come to a very critical crunch. Alberta Urban Municipalities Association identifies that we're sitting with a little over a $26 billion infrastructure deficit within our province. It's $26 billion. Municipalities of all sizes are struggling. And this isn't about the cities of Calgary and Edmonton building big things. This is about all municipalities. It's about the County of Lethbridge trying to identify road needs. It's about the Village of Champion trying to do things with curling rinks and arenas and things of that nature. This is about the City of Lethbridge trying to meet some of its infrastructure needs. When we're talking about infrastructure here as well, you have to remember we're talking about roadways, we're talking about sidewalks. We're talking more critically about underground infrastructure, clean water pipes, wastewater pipes, sewage treatment plants, water treatment plants, critical infrastructure of that nature. What this motion basically is requesting is that Alberta Urban Municipality Association ask the provincial government to implement a provincial sales tax of 1%. And then that money would actually be dedicated to Alberta municipalities for the purpose of capital projects only. This isn't about creating some sort of expenditure pool for municipalities to grab for operations. This is about capital expenditures. In these days of COVID, in these days of incredibly difficult economic times in Alberta, we are needing additional tools or new tools in order for us to perform our role for our citizens. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's here in the city of Lethbridge, the city of regional municipality of Fort McMurray, and all points in between. This is about generating revenue for capital expenditures in our communities. It's a good infrastructure project. It's a good put people to work project in terms of job creation project. It's a good stimulus program for the province to get us back on our feet. It's a way of generating that kind of revenue. I'll leave that as my opening and entertain questions.
Okay, Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kaufman, for bringing this forward. I actually, about a month and a half ago, raised it with some friends and family as well, that a provincial sales tax to support municipalities should be done, because we do have a revenue issue in Alberta, and why not give the money to us? But I wasn't thinking only for capital. So you explained a little bit, but why not operating? Because operating is something that certainly municipalities could use as well.
Absolutely. I think philosophically the big challenge that a lot of municipal governments across the province of Alberta will have is a pool of funds being available for operations. Operations, the complaint we usually hear about taxation is it just goes into a void. With a capital pool of funds, we actually see the benefit back within our community. It becomes a tangible. We have to replace the streets, we have to replace the sidewalks, we have to replace the underground infrastructure, and this is a pool of money that would be dedicated for that. Recognizing that the provincial government would have to establish parameters around how the money is spent, but I would be willing to bet you any good provincial government is going to establish it as being primary or hard infrastructure needs. So to the issue of operating, we operate off of our property tax. Again, it's not always substantial, it's not always enough, but when you add the requirement for funding capital projects as well, that's where the big cost is. So this is about meeting that big cost that all municipalities are facing.
Thank you. I assume there's going to be implementation costs, which would be covered by the province if they're collecting it. So you have $8 billion, but it would really be the net, right? Because whatever they would have to cover the implementation costs with whatever they collect, the rest would go to cities. So the $8 billion, which was not actually in one of your the resolution, is just an approximation.
It's an approximation. It's based on Statistics Canada spending in the retail sector within the province of Alberta. Again, the rules and regulations would be created by the province, so it would depend on what they felt would be tax-worthy in terms of a provincial sales tax. So the $8 billion would be definitely a ceiling or a maximum. I don't want members of council, or eventually, if this goes to AMA, members at AMA to be focused on that dollar figure. It's going to be a substantial pool from which we could build our communities.
And my final question, if I may, Mayor Spearman, is are you seeing this then would go out per capita to municipalities? Like, I know the province would have to create the program, but how would you see a place like Lethbridge getting a share? Would it be on need basis, per capita basis? What would be your anticipated program development?
Well, I have a suspicious feeling that the provincial government will not call me to ask.
Well, what would you say if they did ask?
So I am not even going to speculate. It is honestly up to the province to determine the formula. If we went by the current MSI formula, the way that it's distributed to the cities, and then to towns, villages, and then to rural municipalities, if we were to consider this as sort of the an equivalent in terms of how it was distributed through MSI, you'd be looking at approximately anywhere between 5 and 8 times what we currently get if you maintain the same formula. That's probably the simplest things because municipalities understand what it is that we're doing right now. Currently, I believe, and the Treasurer can certainly correct me if I'm wrong, we are receiving approximately $20 million in 2020 from MSI. That does include some basic municipal transportation grant in there. The entire MSI spending for the province of Alberta in 2020 is just under $1 billion. So let's say that this generated $6 billion. That would be 6 times what you're currently getting. That would be $120 million in the city of Lethbridge to build capital projects.
Or maintain capital projects.
Or to maintain capital projects, absolutely. It's basically money that would go to capital works within your municipality. And there are an awful lot of things that we can complete, we could get to, that could support our community in funding through that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Councillor Kaufman. Sorry. It's been one of those days for everyone, apparently. I appreciate you bringing this forward. It is something that I know provincial governments have shied away from, but when I talk with my friends, families, folks in our community, I think they see the benefits to moving forward to provincial sales tax. And I see the benefit of having some stable funding for capital projects in our community. We'll be sending all this information if this passes, to the AUMA, and they'll probably have some questions on our whereases, or will we just be sending the actionable clause?
Madam Clerk, the process for sending resolutions to AMA?
The process has changed this year, whereas we need a seconder municipality to endorse this adopted motion of council. And then there's a whole, I believe, a background form that would have to be filled in with the motion that therefore be it resolved in the whereas clauses, plus the background. And then they will look it over and give any feedback for any amendments they feel is required. We would bring that back to council.
Excellent, thank you. So the process has changed slightly. Would it be beneficial to canvass the province and see if we have a seconder before moving forward, or is moving forward and then getting a seconder an okay part of the process?
Councillor Carlson, this is Councillor Kaufman. I actually sent the draft motion to Mayor Bill Givens in Grand Prairie. He's either passed out or ignoring me because he hasn't responded. I'm assuming that if this were to pass, we could probably send this out to numerous municipalities. We could even approach Mayor Morishita from Brooks. As president of AUMA, I think that any opportunity for creative support for municipalities would certainly be in his bailiwick. So I think once it passes, if it passes here, we could probably find a seconder somewhere in the province for it. I have no doubt around that.
Excellent. I'm fairly confident as well. Final question at this point. It's just a whereas, it's not the actionable clause, but the $8 billion annually, every figure I've tried to access, the most I can come up with at a 1% is about $3 billion, and that's at the most. Can you talk me through how you came up with $8 billion?
Thank you. I went to Statistics Canada and used their research on consumer spending in 2019 for the province of Alberta. And of course, as always occurs when I'm presenting these things, I'm making sure it wasn't a different province, but I'm 99% certain it was Alberta that was on. The challenge is going to actually come in terms of how you consider it. The province would obviously be establishing the rules, as I said to Councillor Crowson, as to what would be taxable. The $8 billion is based on retail sales. I did actually expand the parameters on that to see what other particular categories they had in there. I do have the data. I don't have the data with me. I would again respectfully request we not necessarily get hung up on that figure. Even 3 is 3 times more than what we have available to us right now. I think as municipalities in the province of Alberta, we certainly would like to get as much as we can for these projects. Even if it's 3, I would be happy with that if the concept were to be approved by the province.
Agreed. Thank you. My only question around that was because sometimes when we've submitted to AUMA, they've come back and had to go through a process of changing our resolution at a public council meeting because some of the figures were off or different than what they could figure out. So I just want to make sure before we send anything to AUMA that all of our facts are fairly consistent. Thank you.
If I may, Mayor Spearman, I had a lot of deliberation about putting any figure in because people focus on the whereases and not on the operative clauses. But if you don't put a figure in, Councillor Crowson's first question would be how much? So it's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. Certainly I'm open to amending it, but based on the research that I had done, this was a figure that I came up with. It will undoubtedly change.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions from council? Councillor Morrow?
Just a thought, Deputy Mayor. So I heard you say that we won't be able to control how this is divvied up, whether it's the 3 billion or 8 billion that this 1% would generate provincially. If it's per capita, I see we would get our fair piece of the pie. But if it isn't, I'm thinking, if we want to do projects for here, is there something similar that we can do here for our own municipality, forgetting AUMA, forgetting other municipalities, where we actually generate some sort of funds for our needs? And what I'm thinking of is how we did it when we built City Hall. And I think you were on council at the time, where we specifically had dedicated some money to generate revenue to build City Hall. So why wouldn't we do that, where now we control the amount of money that we need and want to generate, and for specific projects?
Thank you. That's actually a great question. I'm going to ask the city manager or designate if they recall exactly the process. We had, I believe, designated X number of dollars out of the operating budget to go into a fund for the purpose of building City Hall, but I'd prefer clarification if the new city manager or his designate and the treasurer actually recall what the process was.
Mayor Spearman, through to Councillor Moore. I'm sorry, I don't quite understand what the question is.
Back in the mid-1990s, Councillor Morrow is stating that money was set aside actually for the purchase of City Hall. I'm not certain, Councillor Morrow, if the money was specifically designated or if it just ended up with a coincidental amount of savings that would have gone towards paying for City Hall. Sometimes things happen that way. Perhaps to the point of your question, for me, because this is an AUMA motion, this is about creating infrastructure capacity for all of the province. Yes, we would still have control over whatever our share is, and I do believe that this would be much more than what we could generate by a small increase to operating budget or a small increase to capital budget going towards savings. This is about creating that revenue capacity province-wide.
Okay, thanks. And I know you said stay away from the numbers, but there's a number that was thrown out by you in the resolution of 8 billion, and a number that Councillor Carlson did his homework and found that his number was more like 3 billion. So if my math is correct, and I don't know, I'm using 4.5 million people living in the province of Alberta. If it is 3 billion, my calculation is that we, as our city, based on per capita, would receive 66 million from this 1%. And if it's 8 billion, we'd get 177 million. So do those numbers sound right to you? And or did you think they should be, we might need more based on, you know, our need compared to other municipalities, and not be based on a per capita?
Again, the Premier and Cabinet are not going to call me on implementation. My assumption is the simplest way of reallocating these funds, if this was to be implemented, would actually be through the process that they use at MSI. And so right now the province has committed approximately $1 billion in MSI funding for municipalities in 2020. If it's $3 billion, then what we would do is we would multiply that by 3. You're correct, about $66 million. That's $46 million more than we're getting right now for infrastructure projects. If it's per capita. You could look at the formula as well. If it's not per capita, if it's by MSI, it's $60 million. Okay, so it really is about how the formula would be enacted. Mr. Premier, if you want to call me, I've got thoughts, but I doubt that's going to happen. So I will trust that the provincial government would look at it in a way that makes it equitable, in a way that helps all municipalities address their needs. I look at a lot of the challenges that are being faced in rural municipalities these days. Increased cost in policing, decreased revenues coming in from linear assets, abandoned oil wells that are, payments aren't coming in. Rural municipalities are hurting just as much as urban municipalities are as well. This is a fund that would certainly help them.
Okay, and if I may, Mr. Mayor, my final question. So you've indicated that the Premier or nobody from the province will call you, but I'm assuming that at some point, if this gets passed, and then it's going to be at AUMA, more likely you or the mayor or someone from here will be presenting to AUMA, so they will know who you are and who we are. I forgot my question now. I was going really good with a good question, but I lost it.
Rebuilding up.
I'll have to step out, Mr. Mayor, until my.
Okay. I appreciate the intent of the question, and I want to keep it at a philosophical level rather than the dollar figure level as well. I would ask the mover, and I realize we're putting together AUMA resolutions and that impact the province. The opinion polls that I've seen indicate Albertans are, only 25% of Albertans support a provincial sales tax of any type. I think the number might have recently increased to 30%. My question is, I wonder if this type of a motion would have more success going to the federal government through FCM, adding 1% to the GST across the country, and then having it allocated back on a per capita basis. I guess that would be a second possibility if this one's not successful. But given the attitude of Albertans in the past towards a provincial sales tax, do you think that this resolution is one that would be received well by the province or the provincial government?
Albertans have a very interesting relationship with the concept of taxation. We certainly will complain about it, municipal, provincial, federal. But we do have expectation that our infrastructure is going to be maintained, that it's going to be safe, that it's going to be providing the needs and the requirements of our province. We have a really, and I think the economists would call it crappy economy right now. We have COVID on top of that. We have our natural resource sector, which is being absolutely battered and is not really showing any signs of coming back anytime soon. So there is a requirement to look after aspects of what the government is responsible for looking after. And government could be federal, could be provincial, or could be municipal. There does come a time when we have to recognize that there needs to be a policy conversation about a provincial sales tax in the province of Alberta. We've been fortunate. We've been absolutely blessed as Albertans to not have to do this, but this is not an entitlement. It's a policy decision. Successive governments have chosen year after year to avoid this one particular tool. What's being proposed here is a sales tax of 1%. 1%. So you're spending money in your own municipality. Theoretically, a lot of that money, as Councillor Morrow has identified, goes back to your municipality. And it's a direct cost. You can actually see what's being done because it's infrastructure that's benefiting your municipality. It's not going into the void. This is not for operating. This is not something that Ottawa is collecting, although I really like that idea, that Ottawa is collecting and disappears and goes everywhere. We know it's an Alberta solution, that money is staying in Alberta, money is going to Alberta municipalities. Sometimes you have to do what's right instead of what's popular. And I hate to put it in that term, but that's kind of the reality. We're at a point in this province, I think, where we need to have this conversation. I am happy to be the one to bring it forward here. I look forward to the words you have to express at AUMA when you present it there. No, I think it's time for conversation. And this is not about the provincial government bringing in a 10% sales tax. A lot of the feedback that I've gotten from people prior to this and some social media stuff I've seen today, A lot of it is a lack of trust in elected officials. There's this belief that, bring in one and it's going to be 10%, and that's cynical, and that's, unfortunately, there's probably more examples of that happening. I think it's just a conversation needs to start. I want the money to be spent in Alberta, for Albertans, for Alberta infrastructure. And so it's an idea whose time has come, in my opinion. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Morrow, did you remember your question?
Yeah, I did, and your question kind of triggered it, because I was thinking about the amount of people in Alberta that would support this. But what I wanted to ask you is to make it clear, so that people understand, is that if this passes, and if this passes at AUMA, then I like what you're talking about, the money would stay in Alberta, because I believe the further it gets from us, the more we lose, it just can disappear. So the residents of this city and the residents of Alberta, you're suggesting would pay 1% on everything? Kind of like the GST? Is that what you're implying? On gas and food and clothing and all that sort of stuff? Is that what, or is there something else that you think we can generate that 1%?
Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Absolutely. The province would establish the rules. If you looked at it like GST, absolutely. It would be on the same goods and services that you currently pay GST on. Again, I'm not setting up the regime. It's up to the province to determine the rules. They may think that some things deserve to have the 1% tax. They may say other things don't. And each province has its own nuance to provincial sales tax.
You're okay with the province setting this up if it's successful?
I'm guided by the Constitution, and Section 92 gives the province the authority to do that. So it's not a matter of me being okay with it. It's a matter of the provincial government establishing the regime.
No, but I'm saying,
and the money would come back. Excuse me. And the money would come back to the municipality, to all municipalities. And each of us has the legislative authority to make the decisions as to where that funding should go.
I get that, but in the resolution, should we not have more detail, like per capita or whatever?
No, because
Can't do that.
because if this passes here, this is going to AUMA for a conversation. If it passes at AUMA, all it means is the AUMA executive go and sit down with the province and say, we've got a resolution. And the province can go, thank you, or, okay, we'll consider it. So this is in no way, shape, or form fait accompli. There's still an awful lot of hurdles that we would have to go through.
Thank you.
I see no further questions. So we'll move on to debate. Councillor.
I've opened. Thank you.
Councillor Crowson.
Thank you, Worship. I will support this because I want to start the conversation. Revenue is something that we need to generate in the province. Cities certainly could use more revenue. I imagine it won't get past AUMA, but I'll vote for it at AUMA, just again to continue the conversation. Because if we don't start thinking of different solutions to the problems we have, we'll never get anywhere. And this is a different solution. It hasn't been brought forward before. It's to get people thinking of things in a different way. And you know what? We have had a sales tax in Alberta before. It lasted 6 months, but we have done it once, so we can do it again if the province wants to. So I will support this.
Thank you. Acting Mayor Parker.
Thank you very much, Mayor Spearman. This is a very important resolution because it kind of gives the province a sense of what's your community value, what's your community want, because we're representatives of the community. And a good way of looking at it, if not now, when? I'm going to say it again, if not now, when? Because there is a revenue shortfall in this province, but yet we all want a certain level of service in this province. Everything from healthcare, education, road maintenance, highways, RCMP, even though that is funded through the federal government as well. We all have an expectation, but we also know that oil is probably not going back to where it used to be. Investment portfolio from the province is probably it's not good, and corporate tax revenue is down as well. So if not now, when? What I like about this resolution is it's representative of what we think the community wants. And I've talked to people in the community and I asked them, this coronavirus, we have to put some kind of recovery tax or something in there because there's a shortfall and but everyone expects, there's been a lot of money thrown out at projects throughout the province and we have to pay for that. And our revenue stream is very limited right now. We have a very limited revenue stream. I think it's important that this goes to AUMA and then it gets voted on. And I think if it's debated and discussed well, I think people can get their heads around the 1%. And I think this would carry, we've passed numerous resolutions at AUMA, and as Deputy Mayor said, they can usually take that resolution and they go, hey, thanks, next. But I think this would send a political message to the province that the politicians within the municipalities, villages, hamlets, and cities are saying, you know what, maybe it is time. So I think it's important that we do this. 1% I think is something that is feasible, people can get their head around. So I'm going to support this, and I'm a conservative at heart, but I think this does make a lot of sense at this time where we are right now, because if not now, when?
Okay, anyone else wish to debate? Councillor Morrow?
Deputy Mayor Kaufman, I applaud you for, for bringing this forward. And, up until Councillor Parker spoke, I was actually going to support this. But for some reason, I'm putting a little twist on what I heard Councillor Parker say. This is great, and yeah, we're looking at the money. I mean, you can't deny that we're looking at the money that could be generated and what could come to us and what good things we can do here. And yeah, I do care about Alberta and I care about Canada, but I care about Lethbridge first because this is where we live, and I want us to get the best of everything here before anybody else gets it, which is a little bit selfish, but you know what? That's me. So, having listened to what Councillor Parker said, and I agree, but I see the other side of that. So, and these, correct me if I'm wrong, these aren't my statistics, but apparently we have a high level of poverty in Lethbridge and in southern Alberta. We have a lot of students, we have a lot of seniors, we have a lot of single-parent families. So I was going to support this, but now I'm thinking, okay, so the 1%, we're going to be hitting these people, and they're probably the least that can afford dishing out 1%. It may not be a lot, but over the year, that might add up to a lot of their money coming out of their pockets. So I'm kind of torn here because I like the idea. I can see the benefit of it, but I'm also seeing how I'm now again sticking my hand. The province is sticking their hands if this passes at AUMA and the province. I understand there's a lot more to go to it, but if this does come to fruition, the province is going to be again sticking their hands in people that I've identified, senior students, and so on, that I don't know if that's where I really want to go with. So I don't know if I'm going to support this right now. I'm going to hopefully hear other debate and maybe I could be swayed back. Thank you.
I'm struggling with this, but I think I'm going to support it. I don't think a sales tax is going to receive a warm reception in Alberta, but I would happily trade a sales tax for a property tax. And if we could have ongoing revenues going to municipalities from a sales tax rather than sending out property tax notices once a year, I think that would be a fairer way to fund municipalities. So as a starting point, I will support this resolution. I think it's good to have the discussion about doing things differently. We've done things taxation-wise the same way for about 100 years. When we set up the provinces, and Alberta was set up in 1905, but initially property taxes were set up to fund school systems, and then municipalities joined in after a while. After the First World War, the income tax was developed to pay for the costs of the First World War, and it's never been discontinued. And sales taxes came along largely as a provincial revenue device until the 1990s, when the federal government decided they were going to get rid of the manufacturer's sales tax and implement the GST. But I think we have to look at things a little differently about how municipalities are funded. We've always asked for predictable funding. And this resolution would help us with predictable funding. If the money could be allocated, as Councillor Morrow has said, in a fair manner so that all municipalities receive it based on a formula, that'd be terrific. But first things first, let's ask for a sales tax to fund infrastructure, because infrastructure is really a way that we stimulate the economy. Our investment in infrastructure, our investment in catalytic projects are ones that continue to drive forward. If we had predictable funding for capital investments, we could move forward at our pace. If we had money coming every year, we wouldn't have to be waiting every year to find out if our applications to the province were successful. We have to be very concerned with the possible discontinuation of MSI for the small amount that we currently get from the province. So this would solve those types of problems. And for those reasons, I will support this resolution. Is there any further debate? Councillor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, my colleagues, for the debate thus far. We're just into our second phase here of this KPMG report that's been in, and without knowing exactly what's going to come forward from it, we realize that there will be opportunity with if council decides to go forward with some of the different suggestions for savings at that point that could be used for our infrastructure throughout our community. Running it, if it makes its way through the path of here to AUMA, to the provincial government, it would be my hope that, you know, if this was to pass at that level, but as we already back up a little bit here, if it does get to that point where they receive it, they look at it, and as you had mentioned, Deputy Mayor Kaufman, well, yeah, we kind of like maybe some of this. You could change at that point, and we have seen in the past that sometimes infrastructure has been, on a per capita basis, has been awarded more to Calgary's and Edmonton's and some of these bigger communities. Concerning that a tax gets put in and our citizens, 1%, if you will, of what they bring in will go to fund some of these projects. Not a terrible thing. It's building infrastructure throughout Alberta. But some of the comments that Councillor Morrow had mentioned, that, you know, we're in a struggling time right now, and of course any amount makes a difference. Any amount makes a difference. And this 1%, not knowing really what could happen, I would like to support this for what it could show to each of us, citizens here in Lethbridge. But I look at this KPMG report that's coming out, and I think that we can focus on some of the savings we can get from that, and not have to do the additional, you know, 1% provincial sales tax, because as it is with the GST, sometimes we want it for a short time, but that was supposed to be for a short time as well, the GST, and we've carried on for many more years than it was supposed to be designed to last. So with that, I will not be supporting this resolution.
Thank you. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I'd like to thank Councillor Kaufman, Deputy Mayor Kaufman, for bringing this forward, for showing some great insight, and also for looking at the big picture. Too often in council, as I've heard from this debate, is that people are looking at the little picture, not looking how we can move ahead as a province together, not understanding that if we can get billions of dollars from the 1% sales tax, that maybe the province will be able to fund the social services that we're talking about, and maybe they'll be able to fund healthcare to a better level. It's not just about stealing money from people and putting it into infrastructure. It's about Albertans paying for infrastructure for municipalities, perhaps giving the province a bit of relief so that they can invest in people. And that's what this is important. It's not important for us to go on and on and on about a really good resolution to go to AUMA, and by which I'm going to add, it's absolutely ridiculous that we're debating so long a resolution that's going to AUMA. And I just need you to think about that for a second. It's a great idea. You either support it or you don't, and it doesn't matter at that point because the people of Alberta, the municipalities have to vote for it anyway. Right? So if it's a good idea, and it is a great idea, send it forward. And don't try to mishmash it to death at this level. Let it go forward. My God, you guys.
Thank you, Councillor Miyashiro. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I'm just, I think this is worth the discussion. There's a lot of parts that have to be filled in between now and the next provincial election. So why not give it a go? Let's see what the discussion comes out at AUMA and beyond. So I will support the resolution.
Is there any further debate? I'll ask Councillor Kaufman to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. At the risk of mishmashing this to death, and thank you for your words, Councillor Miyashiro. I do want to acknowledge what one of the previous speakers talked about affecting the low income. Consumption tax does actually impact lower income households than a income tax. However, as Councillor Miyashiro explained, this actually frees up the provincial government to reallocate their resources. They're not now having to commit any money for capital funding to municipal governments. They have the ability now to reallocate their resources to help those who are in need in the province. This is absolutely about a conversation about debate and deliberation, discussion at AUMA. It definitely is one that will get people talking, and that is key. We need to be discussing ideas. We as municipalities across Canada need to be innovative, and this is just one tiny step towards innovation in the province of Alberta, and I would call for the question and ask for your support.
Question has been called. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, it's not unanimous, so roll call for those online.
In favor.
In favor?
Okay, that motion carries 7-2. Thank you.
Of course it does.
We'll now move on to the next one. 6.4. Again, another 2020 Alberta Urban Municipalities Association resolution, continuation of municipal bonds in Alberta. From Deputy Mayor Kaufman. Whereas it is difficult for Alberta municipalities to build capital project based on funds generated by property taxes alone, and whereas Alberta municipalities depend upon provincial grants to support capital projects in our communities, and whereas Alberta municipalities understand the Government of Alberta's desire to reduce provincial spending, and whereas Alberta municipalities understand that part of this reduced spending includes a reduction in funds available for municipal capital grants, and whereas in the absence of provincial grants, Alberta municipalities lack the appropriate tools to generate additional revenues for capital funds, and whereas the Government of Alberta wants to work collaboratively with municipalities in continuing to offer and develop tools and programs to support well-managed, accountable, and sustainable municipalities, and whereas the Government of Alberta desires to help municipalities meet their strategic long-term infrastructure needs, and whereas the Government of Alberta is dissolving the Alberta Capital Finance Authority, ACFA, with the role of providing low-cost loans to local authorities to be continued by the province, and whereas one of the strategies used by ACFA to generate funds was through the issuing of municipal bonds called munis, and where the Government of Alberta could support municipalities by continuing to issue munis, and whereas a further strategy to encourage investment into Alberta and Alberta municipalities would be to make munis an appealing investment tool. Therefore, be it resolved that the Alberta Urban Municipalities Association, AUMA, advocate to the Government of Alberta continue the use of municipal bonds as a tool for Alberta municipalities to generate capital and an opportunity for investment in our province and communities. And further be it resolved that the AUMA advocate to the Government of Alberta to ask the Canada Revenue Agency, CRA, through the Minister of National Revenue to consider Alberta municipal bonds as a tax-exempt investment income instrument. And further be it resolved that the resolution be forwarded to the AUMA for consideration at their annual general meeting of September 23rd to 25th, 2020 in Calgary. Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I'm being encouraged just to say question. This one is actually quite fast and quite simple. We saw in the October budget that the provincial government is dissolving ACFA, who local governments, municipalities and school boards borrow funds, debenture debt. They help fund our capital projects, capital works across the province. One of the strategies that ACFA used is by the issuing of municipal bonds. There's no mention in the budget document as to whether or not the province will continue that through Treasury. So this is just a request from AUMA that the province still continue that strategy, but with the added twist, in order to encourage investment in our province, because our province is very hard hit by a number of factors at the moment, we actually do something that's not done in Canada. We ask that the federal government create Alberta municipal bonds as tax-exempt investment income instrument. American states and American municipalities use this tool on a regular basis for developing capital infrastructure in the municipalities, and you do get a substantial tax benefit from investing in such way. We don't have that in Canada. I'd like the provincial government to start asking the feds to make this, the Alberta municipal bond, a tax-exempt bond to encourage investment into our communities, which, as we know, encourages jobs and development of capital infrastructure.
Questions from councillors? I see none. So we move on to debate. Can I consider that your opening?
Absolutely.
Debate from councillors. Councillor Higgin.
Oh, quickly, thank you, Deputy Mayor Kaufman. When I went through this, I lost a few brain cells, I'll be very honest, trying to go through these whereases, et cetera, but what you would actually explain now made much more sense. Brought it down to this layman terms here than the whereas, so thank you very much for that. That does make sense, and and I've seen that, as you'd mentioned, through some of the different communities in the U.S., but something that could be very beneficial to us as Canadians. So with that, I will be supporting this.
Any further debate? I see none. I'll ask Councillor Kaufman to close.
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor? And online?
In favor?
In favor.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries unanimously. Well, we should have done them in reverse order. We now have 6.5, moved jointly by Councillors Miyashiro and Carlson, 2022 Briar bid. Whereas the 2022 Briar bid committee has requested $1 million in cash and in-kind support for the 2022 Briar bid, and whereas on June the 1st, 2020, City Council received a presentation with regards to this request, and whereas this event meets the criteria of all the guiding principles of the Major Community Event Hosting Grant, and whereas there is $355,845 remaining in the Major Community Event Hosting Grant Fund, therefore be it resolved that the 2022 Briar Bid Committee request of $1 million be funded from the Major Community Event Hosting Grant in the amount of $355,845, and the remainder of $644,155 be funded from the MRSR, Municipal Revenue Stabilization Reserve, and further be it resolved that, as required, the mayor be authorized to provide the bid committee with any letters of support for additional funding applications. Councillor Miyashiro, would you like to open, followed by Councillor Carlson?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor Spearman. So we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago regarding the Briar. as it's one of the largest events that a community can host in Canada. Brings people from all across the country, brings national television exposure to Lethbridge for nine or 10 days. It brings an economic benefit of up to $6.5 to $8 million, depending on what method you use to calculate that. And it is, again, it is something that brings esteem to the city as well. We'll be one of the few communities to ever host the biggest curling events, and it's something we do well. When people say, well, maybe this costs too much. Well, in the big picture, when we're coming out of a COVID recession, and we need to look at things to bring people to the community, get people to spend money in our community, this is one thing that'll help a ton. This is something that will help people to recognize Lethbridge as a place that they want to come back to, a place that they want to send their kids to university or college, a place that they might want to relocate for work. It's not just about the curling, although obviously that's the draw. It's about all the other benefits it brings to the city of Lethbridge. And I'll let my colleague continue with that.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Carlson, would you like to also say anything?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you, Councillor Miyashiro. You've covered most of my salient points. I will say, being half Scottish, it's always hard for me to spend money, but I certainly love curling. When Council created the major community event hosting grant, it was really with events exactly like this that we sort of were planning for and putting some money away so that we could bid on these world-class or national drawing events. Well, these are international drawing events. This is exactly the type of event I had envisioned us using those dollars for. And so I'm very pleased that we still do have about a third of it in our our community event hosting grant. One question I will be asking following this to our city treasurer is earlier in this term, Council did put aside some money in the MRSR for strategic initiatives of Council. And hopefully we still have some of that this will help fund, because this is really a very strategic, forward-looking investment on behalf of our community. As Councillor Miyashiro said, we're moving through our COVID response, hopefully into reopening and recovery very speedily. And by the time we hit 2022, I think our community is going to need something to celebrate and something to really get the economy flat out moving. The type of economic stimulus an event like the Briar brings into our community is huge. I had the opportunity over the last couple of weeks to talk to community members, most of whom in the business community, and they were all very encouraging about the Briar. They know that when an event of this caliber and with this size of a draw comes to our community, our entire community benefits. Not only through the benefit of us having something to get out and celebrate, take part in, and really leave memories for our community, very similar to the Winter Games or the Summer Games many, many years ago when we got the Sportsplex, the NMAX Center. I'm showing my age again. And so I'm very pleased to support this. I hope Council will support this. This is something our community will hugely benefit from, and it's something that our community can look forward to at a time that we're going through a bit of a crisis. So I hope I have all of my Council's support on something that will benefit the entire community.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to questions. Councillor Higgin.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you to the sponsors of the resolution. I do have the one question. I think it was answered here previously regarding the bid cost. So what would go into, if we're successful, the $1 million? If we were not successful, Mr. City Manager, maybe you could answer this, or your designate, would there be any cost involved?
I'll refer that question to the bid. No, there would not be any further cost involved, is what I'm seeing.
Okay, so the $1 million would return if they were not successful.
We wouldn't send it to the bid. $1 million is a balancing number at the end of
The online viewers can't hear your answer unless you use
Has to
the
be at the
microphone.
mic, or, sorry.
Sorry, I wasn't actually expecting to speak. No, what happens is the once the event takes place in 2022, the accounting is done then, whereas we will then get all the bills in for the in-kind. The balancing number between the in-kind and the cash is then paid at that point. So there's no money that goes out from the city at all right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mears.
Councillor Croson?
I'm in for debate, not questions.
Councillor Carlson?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Through you to City Manager or City Treasurer. During our budget process, Council did set some money aside in the MRSR for Council's strategic initiatives. I'm envisioning this as a strategic investment in our community. I'm wondering if we have spent all of that money, or what's the balance of those dollars that we put aside?
Mayor Spearman, through to Councillor Carlson. At the end of 2019, and I just have to double check if anything was drawn on that amount since then, but it was $491,000 left.
Okay, any further questions from council? Councillor Croson? Still debate. Okay, no further questions from council. We will move on to debate. Councillors Miyashiro and Carlson, can I assume your initial statements as the opening?
Agreed. Correct.
Okay. Councillor Croson, debate.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I have absolutely no doubt that there would be advantages to Lethbridge and the local curling committee for hosting this event. And I thank the group for the work they've done in putting this together and the research and information they provided us. But of course, our money is finite, and $1 million is a lot of money. We're in a pandemic that is affecting people's livelihoods, businesses, jobs, families, and we're thinking about what to do with $1 million. I personally think the recovery will take longer than people expect, and I think we will need that money for other items. Medicine Hat recently contributed $100,000 to their community foundation to support their most vulnerable people during the recovery. Medicine Hat, who already, according to the KPMG report, spends 4 times more per capita on social programs than Lethbridge does, gave $100,000 to social programs, and we're thinking about spending $1 million on a sporting event. I can't support that. We have for many years underfunded social programs in this community. We now face a lot of social problems and are thinking about spending $1 million on a sporting event, and rather than investing it in our social programs. Money's finite. I cannot support money on this event. To me, that's like going to the bar when we literally know children are going hungry. Now, someone will likely say, but Belinda, think of the financial returns. When times are normal, our hotels and restaurants are often busy on the weekends without something like the Briar. And that's because of the many tournaments, games played by our hometown teams, through our hockey games, through the kids' programs. I think we'll better support our residents, community, and those businesses, restaurants, and hotels if we work to make sure more money is in the average person's pocket so they can actually afford to keep their kids in sports if they want to. In the long run, that'll have a greater economic impact on our hotels and restaurants and other businesses. If we host the Briar, we'll be the 4th city in Canada to host all 4 curling events. That's something to aspire to. But I'd rather be the 1st city in Canada to come through the recovery in a good economic position. I'd rather be the 1st city in Canada to deal with its social issues and bring down our poverty level, and through all of that, support our businesses, hotels, and restaurants. I can't agree to spend $1 million at this time on this event, and I actually still, and if I do spend $1 million on this event, could I actually still say that I care about the social issues of this community and their families and businesses of Lethbridge? I will not be supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I really understand how many people feel that committing $1 million for a sporting event can seem like an incredibly irresponsible thing to do, especially during a time when a global pandemic has had a devastating effect on our lives, not to mention the social unrest we've been experiencing. While some say you can't do this because of what's going on in our world, I might argue that you should do this because of what's going on in our world. Sport may seem trivial during turbulent situations, but research has shown its power during recovery from difficult times. As an example, in 2001, the UN founded the Office on Sport for Development and Peace, advocating sport as having an almost unmatched role to play in promoting understanding, healing wounds, mobilizing support for social causes, and breaking down barriers. The sport of curling is beloved in Canada and is growing in popularity all around the world. And I believe the Briar not only has the ability to provide an economic shot in the arm, but more importantly, brings us together in untangible ways. And I reached out to a couple of people who have been around curling all of their lives, and I have deep respect for what they had to say. Daryl L. is a competitions and development officer from the World Curling Federation, who, by the way, lives in Lethbridge. And Roger Schmidt, who curled at the Lethbridge Curling Club a number of years ago. He has played and coached on the world's biggest curling stages, including 5 Olympics. He currently lives in Switzerland and runs the Roger Schmidt Curling Academy. So they've been there and they know firsthand the impact that curling brings to a community. And here's some of the things that they believe, which I agree with. Roger says $1 million ask will be, by and large, used to reinvest back into the community in the way of venue rentals, banquet catering, accommodations, local travel. So it should not be regarded as simply an empty handout with no return. There is a huge return. Television, media coverage that is national, which also means television crews and celebrity commentators. It helps Lethbridge connect with the world, placing it even more on the map as a place to go visit, and conversely, gives Lethbridge a golden opportunity to gussy up and put its best foot forward in being an excellent host to a world-class event. This is a citywide event that will involve and be infectious for not just the city, but the whole region as well. And don't underestimate the number of curling fans and people who will be lining up to buy tickets, volunteer, and want to be a part of it. Most likely, there will also be a number of spin-off events that probably will happen around and in support and inspired by the main Briar event. These will go far in generating community, goodwill, further economics, and an incredible sense of city pride. Daryl adds that community solidarity is big. Everyone working together on such a major project helps to bring the community together. Curling is an inclusive sport, and besides room for everyone to play, there is room for everyone to support their community by volunteering for this championship. With more awareness of the sport within the community, there is likely to be an increase in the number of citizens that visit in Lethbridge and to try curling. Daryl also believes it really comes down to the citizens wanting to showcase their community, the business owners who are going to step up and sponsor it, not because of the sport, because of what this could do for the city. We've had the Scotties here, plus the men's and women's world championships. In Canadian curling circles, the Briar is the one that you want in your city. It is our Stanley Cup, and I believe this is a golden opportunity, and we're shovel ready, or perhaps should I say broom ready. I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Acting Mayor Parker.
How do you follow that up? Well said. I just want to kind of comment in regards to, we're not hosting something next week or even next year. This is something for the year 2022. So it's not a matter of, by this resolution passing, we're writing a check for $1 million and that there'll be $1 million shortfall for other organizations or other agencies in this community. It's only if we're successful, and I emphasize the word successful, in getting the bid. And if we are successful, that means we're doing something right as a community, because the organizers, the people in charge of making decisions said Lethbridge is ready for this. The people that are going to be putting the time and effort and putting the bid, there is no cost. Quite often when we get a request like this, usually there's a $50,000 to $100,000 cost in just preparing the bid. I'll use the Memorial Cup as an example. There's a huge cost in just putting the bid together for Memorial Cup. There's no cost for us to put our name forward. There's only a cost if we're successful. We all talk about the economic impact and the spin-off, and we've heard $13 million, $8 million, but there's a lot of things that you can't measure in regards to community pride, community exposure, and just doing it because we're ready. And we've invested millions of dollars into our NMAX Center. We've invested millions of dollars into the ATB to have a top-notch curling place. So if we are successful, I can just imagine the youth in our community getting that much more interested in curling, because I know we always just think about the people that curl are the older people or the seniors or the mid-age people, but actually curling is a growing sport in not only Canada, but also in our community. So I can't imagine any downside to doing this, and I'd ask for council support.
Thank you. I too will be supporting this resolution. I think the Briar is going to be an excellent event for Lethbridge. We have bid in the past for the Memorial Cup. That's a 4-team event. The Briar, there are 10 provinces participating, playing every day for basically a week, plus territories. Everybody in the community, across the country, is very much interested in the Briar, and it has markets in everywhere. The day-to-day exposure of the Briar is probably one of the best investments you could have. We have built an excellent reputation in curling, and I commend those who have hosted the past tournaments, including the World Men's just last year. Tremendous support from the community, and we built that reputation. We struggle to host other events. There are politics in various things that we've applied for when we weren't successful, but in this case, we're building on our past success. This could be tremendous for the city of Lethbridge. We struggle a lot of times with the reputation of our city and with the social issues that we do have. And we can come up with programs to address those social issues, and we can try to be authors of our own success. I think we can do both, but certainly showcasing our city and showcasing what we do well is a great opportunity that shouldn't be passed up. We've heard that the financial benefits, with an investment of $1 million, past host cities have benefited between the tune of $10 and $15 million economically. That's nothing to sneeze at. Getting that kind of a return on the investment is something we should take seriously and make sure that those recovering from the pandemic, those currently struggling from the pandemic, in terms of employment and security, have something to look forward to. This will be a great economic shot in the arm, and I will be proud to support this resolution. Councillor Kaufman?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I want to begin just by stating that it is possible to care for multiple communities, and in fact, it's our responsibility. I spent a lot of last week, I think, in the same place where one of the previous speakers was in terms of the money that we spend in this municipality towards sport recreation versus the amount of money we spend towards social services providing supports to those who are struggling with basic life requirements, let alone the ability to attend a major sporting event. I'm incredibly disappointed in process, and this is, you know, those organizing locally have no impact in this whatsoever, but for these national organizations to continually come into municipalities and ask for money, and that's the buy-in. That process has to change, but we're not here today at the moment to do that. That's actually been sort of what had been motivating me all week, but Councillor Campbell's comments actually tweaked me to something that I'd thought about on Sunday. For a very brief moment Saturday evening, I was distracted from COVID. That was a threat of a tornado. But I was distracted. I actually spent half an hour not thinking about COVID. And sometimes these distractions are sort of what we need in life to help us recenter, to build community. The timing, and I feel very badly for my counterparts on Kelowna City Council, because the timing is going to suck for them. I don't believe people are going to be traveling as much as they could be or should be when they attend the Briar in Kelowna, and I think it's going to be very difficult for them to get through this. That said, 2022, we will be on the other side of COVID based on all the expert analysis. And this may actually be an awakening for a lot of people, the ability to travel, the ability to go somewhere and do something. City of Lethbridge could actually end up being sort of the renaissance of sorts, where people actually feel that they can travel safely, feel that they can come to a community that has the support. 2022 also gives us some time to strengthen our airport, perhaps even work with WestJet, who's flying in and out of Lethbridge, to get charter flights specific for this. So it gives us time to do things. We have the operational review going on. This was mentioned during one of the AUMA deliberations, and there will be one-time savings from that. And I think that we will have some capacity through that to take advantage of some of the money and set it aside if we're in requirement for other things. So as we sit here today in a certain world, in a certain position, I think planning on something like this, at least offering the bid on something like this, is very important for this community. We do have to, however, make some changes, start pushing back on some of these organizations that think municipalities are made of money, because we're not, unless we have a 1% sales tax. And that's something that we should look at addressing collectively and with our counterparts across the country. But to the issue at hand, I will support the motion.
Any further debate? Councillor Higgin.
Mayor Spearman, and thank you to my colleagues for all of the comments before. I thought it was important that I actually do offer some debate, as a couple weeks ago in here I had similar struggles as to my colleague here regarding some of the cost savings and how difficult it is and the monies that we put out into these different events, etc. And then I struggle at times with putting things off for a couple weeks, and sometimes I just want to make sure that they're there and we make a decision. But this is one that was different for me because it gave me that opportunity to really do some due diligence, and I had the opportunity to go back into some of the previous Briars and some of the other communication that has come in as far as the economic impact that events like this have in communities. And I knew that to a point, but it was still difficult with what was going on and what we were passing through with this COVID and how we're going to come out of this on the other side. And as some of the comments have been here, a couple months or a couple years later, this could be the thing to really, bring our community together. I reflect back to a few years ago when I was on a bid committee for the Canada Winter Games, and what that did for the community as a whole. It was amazing, the volunteers that came together for that. And again, as we've heard from most of my colleagues regarding the Briar, and it's the Stanley Cup of curling, and this is something that can bring us back in from these problems that we've had in this COVID time. And we hear about all the different mental health concerns that are going on through this time of COVID. And going again back to when I was on Canada Winter Games, the volunteers and the friendships and that those people get throughout that process is it's exceptional, and it's something that those friendships continue forward, and they build on those relationships. And the volunteers from Lethbridge are as strong as any group of volunteers that I've ever seen throughout other communities. And so again, it was a change in heart with how I believe that this can kind of stimulate and get us back into the other side of COVID. And as was mentioned before, KPMG report, some of these operational reviews will have savings, and I would hope that we could use some of those savings to put towards an event like this. So again, maybe this is something we need to bring our community together after what we've been through. So with that, I will be supporting this.
Councillor Morrow?
Well, I wasn't going to speak because I can do the math and I see where this is going, but I think I need to voice and express my opinion. Quite frankly, I'm getting tired of using COVID and the pandemic and everything else that's going around us as an excuse to do whatever it is we want to do. It also frustrates me when here we are, we initiated a KPMG review. We asked the city manager to do a total review to save money, and yet here we are already without seeing the second phase of this review, spending money that we assume we're going to be saving. So I don't get it. We want to save money, but yet the money that we save, we want to spend. It struggles. I'm having a tough time with that. We want to showcase our city. Great. We do want to showcase our city, but we've showcased our city many, many times. I've been here sitting around this table for a long time, and everybody uses the same arguments. I'm hearing the same arguments. Showcase our city, return on investment, You know, everything's great. The economy, we're going to have a boom. We're going to make 10, 15 million dollars. I get that. But who's going to make that 10 or 15 million dollars? Why aren't these people here handing out some of their money to put in and help us with the bid? Why is it that we, as the city of Lethbridge, always have to fund everything? Why is it, as was mentioned earlier, these national companies come to us and expect us to pay the full amount? I don't get it. Little mom and pop at home, little grandmas and grandpas and aunts and uncles and the ones that are at home that can't afford to go to these events, we're taking $1 million of theirs so that all the restaurants and bars and all those other that are going to benefit, and great, I'm happy that they're benefit. I'd love for them to benefit greatly. But where are they now? Why aren't they kicking in some money? Like, why is it that it's always the city of Lethbridge? And it's pretty obvious, we're overspending. We created this fund, this hosting grant, and we overspend. Now we're trying to dip into another reserve. Like, we could do all of these if we use our reserve money, but is that really what we want to do? This has got nothing to do with curling. It's got nothing to do with it's just sitting around this table for as long as I have. It's the same arguments, a boom to the community. I'm sorry, I don't see the return on the $1 million that the taxpayer is paying. Where is the return for them? Where is the return for them? Because it's their money. And I never, ever seen that. Where is tourism? Is tourism booming? I don't see that. Tourism is the same. People come, people go. We don't attract a gazillion tourists because we're hosting an event. And we've hosted many, 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 many events. So for us and for me to hear the same song and dance over and over and over and over, yet the end result is just give me money so we can host this event, and that's it. And that's what happens. So as much as I love curling, as much as I love the people that are involved in curling, and as much as I love all the bars and restaurants and everything else that makes our community what it is, I'm sorry, there comes a time where I think they need to start sharing in some of the costs in hosting these events, because they're the ones that actually benefit. For those reasons, I won't support this.
Thank you. Councillor Miyashiro, would you like to close? And I'll ask Councillor Carlson to close.
Why don't you let Councillor Carlson go first?
Oh, okay.
I opened.
Thanks. I can lead off. Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and thank you to all my colleagues for the excellent questions and debate and thoughts, because I think we've all shared various portions of them at every time. I will go back to the major community event hosting grant, and this is really, truly what it was set up for. When we get these opportunities for these world-class events that will showcase Lethbridge and bring people into Lethbridge from outside, showcasing our community even better, that was what it was intended to do. The Briar will do that probably 10 times more than any event that I envisioned at that time. I would like to say that I do understand $1 million is a scary thought for folks, and especially when folks are experiencing challenges, as one of my colleagues talked about the social issues and possible investments in our community. But the choice is not a binary one. It's not either or. It's not you can either fund social programs or you can fund economic development and community events. So I look forward to future debates. I think we'll be getting into that in November when we reopen the operating budget about how we can approach the other side of things. And I wouldn't say that not using COVID as an excuse for this. This was what the major community hosting grant was set up for many, many years ago. So it wasn't a spur-of-the-moment COVID excuse. I do understand that when we talk about the economic benefits and impacts, it is for much of the business sector, obviously. It's our hotels, our bars, our restaurants, our retail shops, our gas stations, our tourism products. But those folks pay a heck of a lot of taxes here into our community. And so they deserve to be looked out for, as well as the average citizen. I agree. But I also have to remind folks, those hotels, those bars, those restaurants, those service stations, all of those businesses employ Lethbridge residents. And so giving them an economic benefit gives the average citizen in Lethbridge an economic benefit. I don't think we can forget that. We often talk about, oh, this is just for business. Well, business supports our residents. We have to remember that as well. I would just like to say in closing that I've got my fingers and toes crossed that this passes, and then I will cross everything else that we are the lucky bidders on this, because now I'm going back to COVID. This would be one heck of a celebration for Lethbridge, one heck of a boon for Lethbridge as we come out of this COVID crisis. It's not the main reason for doing it. If COVID didn't exist, I would still be pushing for this. But I think that's just an added bonus to us for that added experience for Lethbridge and the economic boon. With that, I'll close and let Councillor Miyashiro say his final thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank my colleague for his words, and I echo everything he said as well. One of the things that Councillor Croston talked about was funding social programs. And I don't think there's anyone on council knows more about funding for social programs than I do. I also do know that this kind of one-time funding, in order to be effective for social programs, you have to stretch it out over time, and you have to commit that dollar to that time and that effort. And then you have to pick which programs you're going to fund, and you have to figure out those things. It's not that it can't be done. This dollar wasn't meant for that kind of thing, and that's why we have budgets, and that's why we deliberate on these issues. And I'd like to thank everyone for the debate as well. Someone said something about the operational view would fund this kind of event, and I don't think anyone's ever said that. That the operational review would fund this event. We have some funding sources for this event that have been identified. None of them were the operational review. Someone talked about what benefit are there for kids and some families. During the men's worlds, during the Scotties, during the women's worlds, school kids were given tickets to come and watch the games during the day. It was like an outing. It was a real thrill for them, I know. When my son was young enough to go, they took full advantage of that to have the thrill of attending a world championship. What I really want to say about having a championship of this type, and how it reflects on our community is that when the World Mixed Doubles and Senior Championships were in Lethbridge, I got a chance to meet the Hamilton family from Duluth, Minnesota. The son and the daughter, I think it was Matt and Becca, were Team USA at the World Mixed Doubles. And their parents were so thrilled and so happy with the reception that their kids and their family received in the city of Lethbridge, that they said if they ever had an opportunity to come back, they would. Well, the next year, John Schuster's team won the U.S. Championship and came to Lethbridge. And the Hamilton family was once again attended, and I was volunteering in the patch during that week, and I sought them out, and we had a great chat about them coming back to Lethbridge in such a short time. And they said, well, it wasn't easy to make that trip 2 years in a row because it's fairly expensive for them. But one, it was their son in the Worlds, and two, they appreciated so much the community and how people were even behind Team USA and behind their kids, and the great curling environment that they felt compelled to come back. And that's what it says about our community. That's what will happen with the Briar when people from other provinces and territories come here and get that kind of reception. And when they have other opportunities to come to Lethbridge, I'm sure they would take it. And that's what the Briar is all about. And that's why I urge my colleagues to support this. Call the question.
Okay, question's been called. All in favor? And online? In favor?
Carlson, in favor.
Opposed? That motion passes 7-2. Thank you. Okay, it's 4:20. We can go on to bylaws at this point, unless council wants a break.
A quick break would be good.
Okay, quick break. Okay, hopefully back by 4:30.
Carlson here, just checking to make sure I'm still online.
I'm here with you.
Yeah, it's been pretty quiet.
Oh, yeah, it's 4:33, so I don't know. Did you get a text?
We
from
turned
anybody?
off our mics. We're still
Oh.
waiting for Councillor Kaufman to come back from the media interviews.
Okay, thank you. I just wasn't sure if my phone has been acting up. I thought I may have disconnected myself. We could probably do the utility deferral update while he's out there.
City Council updates?
Well, there's the utility deferral update, 711.
Okay, sure.
And Chris, I did have a question. Do we have a motion to accept it as information, or is it just there?
711, we've got motions for second reading from Councillor Miyashiro. Second and third reading.
On 711?
Yes. I got, yeah, okay, sorry, these are mislabeled, I think.
I think so.
Your Worship, 711 and 712 was a request for this bylaw to come back by June 19th. It was a request of Councillor Kaufman, so we're just bringing it back to see if Council wants to amend for continuation or to rescind.
Thank you.
I think it's 7.31.
629, yeah, that one is.
I think it's that one.
So then while we're waiting, if I understand correctly, 711 and 712 are tied with 731. Is that correct?
And then that one. So this one was a request by Councillor Kaufman to come back with that bylaw. Is that third reading?
Okay. What we're going to deal with is Bylaw 6226, Temporary Financial Fees and Utility Payment Waiver Bylaw, 7.1.1. Moved by Councillor Kaufman. I don't have an actual resolution.
Are you doing 7.1.1 or 7.1.2?
A little bit confusing here.
My agenda states bylaw 6226 is 7.1.2.
I believe 7.1.1 is just background information for that item.
That's correct, yes. That's the report we were asked to file on bylaw 6226.
Thank you. So I believe that was my request that it come back to City Council. This was about just following up or closing the loop on the utility deferral program update, trying to get some numbers, excuse me, I am going to lose my voice here, trying to get some numbers and information on the uptake of the program by our residents, and so the council could actually see the, hopefully the benefit that this has provided to the community. If you're looking for a motion, that's just a motion to file then.
Any questions from councillors?
So would you say you just want to do a motion to file?
Yep. So I think Councillor Kaufman has made the motion to file. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Now, 7.1.2. yes, what do we have there?
That was the actual bylaw that pertained to 7.1.1. 7.1.1 was the report information. 7.1.2 was the bylaw that had third reading. So it's kind of part and parcel when you're filing.
This was the original bylaw.
Yeah, that received third reading a few months ago. We were asked by council at the time when it received third reading that it come back before it expired to notify council and see if anything wanted to be done with it, to continue on and amend, or just let it expire on June 19th.
Okay, so this bylaw will expire on June the 19th. So again, for information,
It's information that belongs to 7.1.1. That was the report that administration did, that Agenda Review Committee had asked us to prepare.
okay, so that's filed. Okay, 7.2. So this is
Sorry,
for,
Mr. Mayor, just, I need to follow properly here. So I'm looking at my agenda. So 7.1, it says bylaw and updates, and 7.1.1, which we dealt with. Now it says 7.1.2, which is Deputy Mayor Kaufman's. Is that the one we're dealing with now?
we voted to receive and file.
So if I can, Councillor Morrow, we passed bylaw 6226 back on April 6th, and one of the conditions of the bylaw was that it expire on June 19th. So I had asked at the time, close the loop, let us know what's happened. So 7.1.1 is a report out from administration on what happened, what transpired, the number of asks, the requests of things of that nature. 7.1.2 is just basically the bylaw that we had passed. The bylaw will expire on June the 19th.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spearman.
Okay, we'll move on to 7.2. For first reading from Councillor JHC.
That's Carlson.
Carlson and Miyashiro. Bylaw 6228, a bylaw to prohibit the business practice of conversion therapy. This is just for first reading. There's no discussion, no debate at this point. Second and third reading have not been scheduled at this point. This basically publicizes the bylaw and makes it available to the community.
So why was this pulled out of the agenda, the consent agenda?
Pardon?
Why was this pulled out of the consent agenda?
It was pulled out so it would stand alone. So quite often when we pass the consent agenda, if there's a bylaw of significance, people wouldn't notice it. So this has just been introduced to make the community aware that the bylaw has been introduced at this point.
Okay, then I will call the question.
Okay, question's been called. All in favor? Opposed? And online, I'm assuming you're in favor. So that motion,
Favor, Carlson.
that motion carries 7-2.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to 7.3.1. I have a resolution from Councillor Miyashiro. Bylaw 6229, a bylaw of the City of Lethbridge to temporarily defer utility payments. Be it resolved that Bylaw 6229, a bylaw of the City of Lethbridge to temporarily defer utility payments, be given second reading. Councillor Miyashiro?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. So residential and small commercial utility customers may be experiencing financial hardship because of COVID-19 health pandemic. On March 18, 2020, the government of Alberta announced a utility deferral payment program for natural gas payments to reduce financial hardship to Albertans. At that time, the government recommended that municipalities enact a similar deferral program for municipal-owned utilities such as water, wastewater, and recycling. Bill 6229 will allow eligible City of Lethbridge utility customers to defer current utility charges incurred between March 18, 2020 and June 18, 2020. The repayment period for the deferred amounts shall be from June 19, 2020 until June 18, 2021, with the repayments being made by equal monthly installments during this period.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Kaufman?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, to the city manager designate. Section 4 of the bylaw states the deferral period shall be for the period from March 18th, 2020 to June 18th, 2020. If somebody has a request to defer outside the date, so obviously after June 18th, is it just through the usual process?
Yes, that would be the intent.
Okay, thank you. And people have until June 18th, 2021 to repay the deferred amounts?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And final question, if they wish to participate in this, it's the deferral again from March, I just had it right there, whatever the date was in March, up until June 18th. Is it an issue just phoning 311 to be put to the right department, or should they contact somebody directly?
No, that's right, 311.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Spearman.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To the city managers, this bylaw will allow, I'll speak just for me, my utility payments that I pay every month to the city, I will now don't have to pay them until June of 2021. Is that what this is saying?
No, what it's saying is if you apply for the program and you wish to defer for that 3-month period that was outlined in the program, that you'll be able to repay those in equal installments over a 12-month period.
So the 3 months,
if you haven't paid, if you chose because of your personal circumstances
yes,
to seek this deferral as a result of COVID, that 3-month payment that you did not pay because you deferred
right,
will be worked into your payment going forward over a 12-month period.
Thanks for that clarification.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we'll move to debate. Councillor Miyashiro, you've opened. Any debate? I see none. I'll ask Councillor Miyashiro to close.
This will certainly help people that require the assistance. I ask council to support this.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Any opposed online? That's,
no.
That's unanimous. Third reading. Be it resolved that Bylaw 6229, a bylaw of the City of Lethbridge to temporarily defer utility payments, be given third reading, and the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign and seal the same. Councillor Miyashiro.
Call the question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you. We'll move on to inquiries. Councillor Parker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, we're coming into the season when fawns are being born, and I was just inquiring, Mr. Director to the City Manager, is there an ability to put up more signage, for example, especially along University Drive? There's a lot of deer on that road there, and I know there's really actually no deer signs up on that road. They're actually rather on McLeod Road, McLeod Boulevard, or McLeod Trail, I can't recall. Is there an ability to put up probably some more signage? Because I know we're not mowing the boulevards as often right now, and quite often the fawns are kind of hiding in the brush near the roads. Is there an ability to put up some more signage in that area in regards to University Drive, especially because there is a lot of deer in that area?
Not quite sure who to look at here, to be honest.
Yeah, we used to have deer crossing signs on University Drive. So I'll confirm where they went, because it is a known crossing area. There's Whoop Up Drive is also a known crossing area in spite of how wide it is. So we'll review where our signage is and where we have those known deer crossing areas, and we'll make sure that adequate signage is put in place.
Thanks for talking, because maybe during that construction time they could have made and relocated and all that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Two inquiries. One, I'm going to use the time actually for a bit of a PSA, if that's possible. We are doing something different with transit. Do we want to make a, what are we doing different with transit?
As of today, we've moved to taking reservations for the by reservation system online, which should improve hopefully the provision of that service while it continues to exist until we get back to a resumption of regular operations.
Excellent. So there's no longer the 24-hour requirement. You can do this a little faster than what we've been able to do in the past?
That's right, yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for undertaking that. Second question, I know that the functional planning study for 5th Avenue North and 13th Street North is underway. Some of the feedback that I've been getting from people regards the amount of commercial traffic on 13th Street and 5th Avenue. And I think if I recall back to my days here in the mid-90s, nothing has changed. Commercial traffic is heavy in that area, in those particular areas, especially the residential along 5th Avenue, because under the Traffic Act, vehicles have the right to take a non-truck route if it's the shortest distance. There's been no provincial regulation change to address that. Are we still going to have to put up with this time in memoriam to the city manager or designate?
That is correct. It's not a designated dangerous goods route, so that is a prohibited traffic. But in terms of just regular commercial traffic, commercial vehicles, 5th Avenue, 13th Street are available for those vehicles to use. In particular, if they're, and it would be hard for us to prohibit it given the fact that there is commercial areas there that are being serviced by those commercial vehicles. So, yeah, no change in terms of provincial regulation.
And so if I understand correctly, the provincial regulations basically are if it's the shortest route between where you're leaving and where you're going to, you are permitted as a truck traffic to take that.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Hagan.
Mayor Spearman, question for the city manager or his designate. I've received a lot of different questions and concerns regarding the condo recycling, and I've met with a few different groups, and I was talking with Mr. Hawkins earlier just in regards to where we are with that, because the questions still come in and just whereabouts we are with this whole process. As I know that that's going to be something that could be rolled out later, but just for that engagement side of things, if we can find out an answer to that.
Yeah, you would have seen there's sort of an ongoing dialogue with a couple of the large condominium complexes still unhappy with the fact that they'll be subject to the $7 increase in waste collection charges as a result of residential recycling. We are working with those folks directly in terms of identifying the preferred collection method for each of those facilities. But the $7 is the $7 there is not any kind of negotiated price just because they're in a condo building as compared to a small apartment building or single-family resident, and we continue to communicate that to those folks. In terms of timing, we're currently still dealing, we've got about 75% of the apartment or multifamily complexes of less than 45 units complete, so another 25% of them to go. There's some final notifications going out again to those smaller apartment facilities this month to remind them to contact us to make arrangements, because September 1st, they'll be subject, those unit holders will be subject to the increased utility charge. For the large multifamily, over 45 units, and that's the Sierras, the Rio Vistas, the View, and a couple of those complexes. Implementation is still being delayed until January 1st of next year, but notifications are going out this month again, reminding them of the program, reminding them of the bylaw, and reminding them to contact our operations folks to work out the method of collection that best suits their individual needs. They will be subject, as the program gets implemented, once those multifamily complexes are served and are being collected, that's when the charges typically get triggered on their bill. So none of those large complexes yet to receive those increased recycling charges because we're not looking at full implementation until 2021 for them. But that, we're working through an implementation strategy with all the multifamily, the apartment building complexes as we speak. So we would encourage, if you're dealing with them directly, if they're reaching out to you directly, to refer them to our waste and recycling folks. Joel Sanchez is the point person. Have them reach out to him directly if they've got concerns about the collection method or concerns about the recycling program in general.
Now, so if there's 75 units, and regardless from what I'm hearing that's going to be a $7 charge that's going to be coming, are we putting 75 bins, or this is what you're dealing with? So they're going to have similar to what they had before for, I think one of them was 48 times as much cost to have the same thing done.
So some of these complexes have recycling happening and have
before we did.
Yeah, actually. Exactly. Actually, they were recycling. So they have some offering right now, but it is not the full suite of recyclable materials that we are collecting as part of our commingled program. And again, that was a council decision to actually make residential is residential is residential, and the rate structure is set up in such a fashion that it doesn't matter whether you're in an apartment building or you're in a single-family resident, you'll still receive that additional recycling charge. The collection method will vary, though. But just we have looked at the cost of service, and even though they're convinced that our service should cost them less, in fact, it won't, because if they take full advantage of the full service that we provide in terms of recycling, the frequency of pickup will be more than bi-weekly, in order to service those large complexes. So that cost of service is about the same, regardless of whether you're in a big apartment building or you're a single-family residential unit. And we have communicated to that folks. They're not convinced, and they're not convinced on the basis that they have some kind of a modest recycling program today, but we don't know what that is. And for the most part, it's typically just it's cardboard and paper. Whereas we provide recycling for plastic, cardboard, paper, all those materials as well.
So just in finalize this, I know I've seen the different programs that they have, and they actually extensively more than what we have. Glass, I don't think we do glass yet, do we? Glass.
We're not picking up glass at curbside or at these facilities. No, if
and they
people
don't have
want to
to
get rid of glass, they have to take it to our depots.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Morrow?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My inquiries deal with the garbage trucks. I've been asked to ask you, I guess what some people are thinking or saying, and I don't know where they got this from, is that our garbage trucks, in order to prevent trips back and forth to the landfill, many of them become overfilled and overweight, and so apparently that's not good for the trucks, and they wear out quicker, and we don't know if the manufacturers will honor any of that. So that's one issue that I can't answer. And the other one is, does a garbage route actually last 8 hours, or do they finish within 4 to 5 hours? And if they do, what do they do with the other 3 or 4 hours, or do they get paid for the 8? So these are questions that I've been asked that I can't answer. I don't need an answer now. You can provide that to me later.
Thank you. My question is to the city manager regarding the alternative homeless shelter at the LSCO. And we're certainly hearing community complaints about issues associated with that in the civic field. What's the plans with respect to the second homeless shelter, temporary homeless shelter at LSCO?
We recognize that there have been some issues with the temporary shelter that's been established, and the homeless shelter will transition back to its original location on Wednesday, this Wednesday, the 17th. We plan to hand deliver letters to residents in neighborhoods around the current temporary shelter to inform them of this change, and also to acknowledge their patience in allowing the city to take the step to deal with what was a challenging situation under COVID and ensure that we kept members of the community safe. And in the interim, modifications have taken place to the original shelter so that it will be able to comply with COVID requirements in terms of physical distance, both in terms of the shelter itself and the Intox site. And we'll be pushing that information out to the public this week.
Thank you. The original decision to use the LSCO as an alternate second shelter location was made as part of our local state of local emergency. As part of the decision-making process, and that really had nothing to do with City Council. Yeah.
That's right, yes.
Okay, thank you. There's no further inquiries. We'll move on to City Council updates. Are there any updates from Council, your committee work? Councillor Kaufman?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Just want to remind members of Council, we received an invitation a couple of weeks ago about participating in a Zoom workshop or a Zoom presentation tomorrow on Blue Zones. This is an initiative that the City of Airdrie had undertaken. And there is a local group that's looking at organizing a similar project here in Lethbridge. Blue Zones project is a community-led health and well-being improvement initiative which is designed to support communities in becoming healthier through changes to a city's environment, policy, social, and healthcare networks. There are more than 45 Blue Zone communities in the United States. Airdrie was actually the first in Canada, and the people in Airdrie want to do a presentation for volunteers here in Lethbridge. It is a community-wide initiative, but it does require the municipality being a participant in this as well. So if you are interested, please let me know and I can give you the information of the person that sent you an email a couple of weeks ago to sign up for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further updates from Council? Just like to...
Carlson.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Carlson.
Okay. Thanks, Mayor Spearman. Just a couple quick updates. The community and social well-being pillar of Lethbridge Recovery has had a couple meetings. We've sent out questionnaires to many organizations and individuals throughout the community. Hopefully, if they're listening, the reminders, we're hoping to get most of that back by tomorrow for our next meeting. So if anyone's listening, if you can get those back to us, we'd appreciate it. The Performing Arts Steering Committee did meet last week. We have expanded our scope a little bit to include two models now, the non-traditional Performing Arts Center and the traditional. Unfortunately, that's put us a bit behind as Deputy Mayor Kaufman amended in our referral list. That's why we're putting out the timeline for us reporting back till perhaps mid-September or end of August in that area. So that work is proceeding along. Tourism Lethbridge has been obviously monitoring COVID quite closely. We're working with our local groups trying to get some sort of staycations. Hopefully we can expand that to get more local visitors into our town from the surrounding areas. And our search for the executive director is going well and speedily, and we'll have further updates on that. I think that's all for me for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a reminder to Council and the community, our public meeting for Community and Economic Recovery Committee, that meets on Thursday at 1:30. The subcommittees will all report on progress since the last meeting. So those interested in community and economic recovery, that is a public meeting coming this Thursday. With that, we'll move on to the closed meeting omnibus motion. One more. Okay. All right. So can I have a motion to go in camera, please? So moved by Councillor Crowson. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, I think we'll excuse members of the senior management team. It's just City Council and City Manager.